I see something. Testing, testing, one, two, three. Not the music. Anyways.
Might be live. Testing, testing, testing. I've got my audio now. Say something, Joe.
Testing, testing, one, two, three.
All right. I've got you on there too. Let's make sure that we're kind of quiet.
Is it live? Let's move this over here.
Hey, Joe, just do a quick sound check. As loud as you
Sound
can.
check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, sound check.
Elran, I'm gonna be doing my best to be doing shout outs. Today's gonna be a little bit different. Can you just let me know if my audio music is very low? Okay. Can you let me know if Joe and I, you can hear us okay?
Focus on. Maybe not if the music's so loud.
Yeah. Let me know if it's still too loud. It just throws everything at like full blast, which kind of sucks, but. Elran, is that better? Yes. And you can hear Joe and I. Joe, sound check.
Sound check, sound check. Lights on, right, it's awesome.
Okay. I'm going to assume he can hear us. Lower it a bit more. Okay. How's that? Is that better? This is why I need I need like a studio.
Mike, where's my 250 at?
No. You don't need 250. Is that better? Okay, and you can hear both Joe and I clearly.
Yeah, hear more audio than me, but
okay, good. He said yes. Well, looks like we have an audience of 2. So, I mean, we can give it 2 more minutes and then get the show started, or what do you say, Joe?
yeah, I'll say so.
Hey, there he is. What's up, Sneaky Steve? Thank you so much for joining, man. Hey, at least I know there's one hardcore Star Wars fan in here, and I'd be happy with at least showing him what we did. Sneaky Steve. I know you might not be able to stay the whole time, but hopefully you can catch at least the ending too. I think everybody will enjoy it. So just giving it a few minutes, let people jump in. If at any time you guys can't hear Joe or I clearly, please make sure you let us know.
Whatever.
Oh man, isn't that a good question, Steve? We don't know. We don't have a time frame. We're gonna just see how this goes. Again, if it's quieter, might have a small crowd, so it might go a lot quicker than I anticipate. But at least an hour and a half, we're hoping for. So, and bear with me. I'll be trying to do. Oh, that's awesome! Thank you, man. I'll be doing my best to do shout outs throughout the stream, so just bear with me, everyone that shows up to support. Appreciate it. All right, Joe, what do you think? 210? Should we just start?
See. Transpire through the force. go fix it. Better be glad there wasn't any kind of Imperial blockage or anything. So indeed. Coming around.
Hey, sorry. No one heard us. Lovely. Oh man. Sorry. Well, this is raw. Joe, you can hear us, right? Or everyone can hear Joe?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all good. It's a good thing I'm not on camera. So, just a quick note I just want to mention we do not own any material owned. Just going to read a quick little snippet here. All images, clips, and music are used of property of Walt Disney Studios. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976 allowance is made for fair use. Purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So again, this is all for fair use. Joe, you seem a little low, so just make sure let's get as close as we can so everyone can hear us.
I hope your girl can hear me.
Okay. And thank you guys. Again, this is happening live and raw, so you guys, this is totally on the spot. Hopefully we don't run into any more roadblocks, but you probably did not hear any of our talking back and forth on the ship, but that's okay. We'll do it for next time. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, fellow Star Wars enthusiasts, to the Millennium Couch Podcast. I am Jedi Knight Lightside Mike, and I'm joined by my fellow Grey Jedi Darkside Joe. Together, we're here to guide you through the galaxy far, far away with our passion and knowledge of all things Star Wars. Coming to you from a couch far, far away, Darkside Joe and Lightside Mike welcome you all to the first ever Millennium Couch Podcast. We come to bring you love and admiration for all things Star Wars. Be it a comic book, a toy, a video game, a news article, or anything in between, we have you covered. In a time of darkness and uncertainty, where the evil empire seeks to crush the spirit of the galaxy, we stand as your beacons of hope and light. Armed with our lightsabers and the power of the Force, we will fight for justice and freedom for all. Join us as we soar through the stars in our X-Wings, engaging in epic battles against the forces of evil. As we work, we're reminded of the heroes that came before us, from Luke Skywalker to Princess Leia, from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Yoda. Their stories inspire us to continue the fight against tyranny and oppression. But our journey is not just about battles and conflict. It's also about the friendships we forge, the lessons we learn, and the wisdom we gain along the way. From the desert sands of Tatooine to the forest moon of Endor, from the bustling streets of Coruscant to the icy plains of Hoth, we will explore every corner of this galaxy, uncovering its secrets and mysteries. All right, I'm going to play something. Hopefully it works.
So join us on the Millennium Couch as we delve into the lore, the mythology, and the magic of Star Wars. From lightsaber duels to space battles, from droids to Wookiees, from Sith Lords to Jedi Knights, we will discuss it all with passion, insight, and humor. May the Force be with you always, and may the galaxy be forever changed by our words and deeds. Welcome to the Millennium Couch podcast, where the adventure never ends.
There we go. Looks like that worked. Okay, let me change it up here. Oops. There we go. Welcome all again. I want everyone to be welcomed in. You guys are more than welcome to type away in the chat. Joe and I will be on the lookout for any messages so we can reply and add your input as it comes through. This podcast is meant for all fans from every corner of the galaxy to have a safe and fun place to discuss all things Star Wars. Today, we begin a new adventure on a story that was released 47 years ago. Some of you may have been around, and some of you may not have been around yet. But everyone at some point has heard of Star Wars, and today we'll celebrate none other than A New Hope, which will be our focus for its first episode. So we're going to first just discuss some of the basics about the podcast. This is live and raw, as you guys have already seen. Technical difficulties, but that's okay. This is our first attempt, and we're giving this our best shot. So we're open for feedback, suggestions, and more importantly, any assistance to help make this show grow. So let's start off with the who, what, where, when, and why, and how of our show. So who? For now, it's going to be just Joe and I, but I want to pull in all fans of Star Wars. We invite you, the viewers. You guys can send us coverage requests or suggestions. I'm going to go ahead and drop the Discord throughout the show, so if you guys want to join it and stay up to date with us, you can. What? We plan to cover all things Star Wars. We are not following canon versus non-canon. We plan to cover everything. Whether you're a big fan of the new Disney movies or not, we're going to cover those too. When? We're still working that one out. Right now, we're debating if this is going to be monthly, if it's going to be every 2 months. I've got some major life events coming up. There's a little Jedi on the way, so we might have to put a pause until our next episode, but this will continue. And where? The Millennium Couch, of course. We will be streaming off of Twitch and YouTube until further notice, so hopefully that works out for everybody. And why? Because we love Star Wars, and we want to share that love of Star Wars with you all. We want to cover some of the things that even you guys may not have heard or know about. When we say that there's a lot of stories and a lot of galaxies to explore, we mean it. We want to create a safe place, again, for those true Star Wars loving fans. And then, of course, the how. I'm going to go ahead and drop the Twitch and YouTube. If you're on here, you know how. There you go. Hey, Stel, quick shout out to you, man. Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with the show. First thing we want to start is the tales, again, in the original trilogy, what started it all. But before that, I'd like to touch on how each of us, Joe and I, got into Star Wars. So, Joe, why don't you go ahead and kick us off and tell us about the tale of Star Wars and how you began this great adventure?
I love being the first person to kind of start talking, so it's always fun. So for me, it's like obviously a galaxy far, far away, and that far, far away was 1997, and that happened to be the 20-year re-release they were doing for theaters at the time. Before that year, I did not know anything of Star Wars to my recollection at this point. So my parents decided to go take myself and my sister to go see A New Hope. My sister wasn't as excited as I was. Um, that's kind of basing my excitement at that point from pictures and posters, and obviously some TV ads that were rolling at the time. So that was the first movie I went to go see was the original. Um, I was pretty much awestruck the whole time. More so once we see the battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. So just seeing, a light sword, as they were called back in the day. Uh, but just seeing that on screen was just all expiring. So just really cool to see. I mean, that's the first part, and then when it jumps to the X-wings and seeing them approach the Death Star, that just takes it to a whole nother level. So, being pretty much a 10-year-old at the time, or about to be 10, it just blew me away just to see that. And so that once I left the theater, once we got back home, my parents informed me like, "Oh, do you know there's two more after this?" I'm like, "Oh, really?" They're like, "Yeah." I said, "We got." It's like, "Oh, we got to totally see them." Don't know why we didn't go back to the movies to see them. We ended up renting them from a Blockbusters or something similar back then. Um, and for me, obviously a lot of people were, I guess, jaw dropped when they learned the news about who Darth Vader was in Empire Strikes Back. For me, I didn't get that news in that form, unfortunately. So for me, I learned of Darth Vader's real identity from the Return of the Jedi. So I don't know if it was my mom or my dad, but one of them mistakenly decided to watch the Return of the Jedi after I have seen the New Hope. So I learned of who Darth Vader was during the scene where Luke is turning himself over to his, at that point, his father. So I was like, "What? Get out! No way!" Like, it was even more crazy just because the fact, you see Darth Vader, or Anakin at the point after he, dies at the end, what he looks like under the mask. So it's like way more crazy for me just to see that all unfold. Unlike, in Empire, to see, Luke's hand get chopped off, and he's like, "No, I don't believe you," and then you see Luke fall, and that's pretty much it at that point. So for me, it was pretty intense. Um, I mean, just from there, I, wanted to collect everything Star Wars. Just from seeing Mike's collection personally, is nothing as extreme as that. I wish it was, um, but ever since I've been hooked. So just something where, like any other person, that when they once you're a kid, some people want to grow up and not be keep that childish lifestyle. Me, I think you have to continue being a kid as you grow older. I mean, if you don't, it just there's no fun in life, as I see it. So just being able to not only see it originally in '97, but see the prequels come out and this unfold and then come to where we are today is just it's been a journey for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, that's that's a crazy story too. To have seen Darth Vader with the Return of the Jedi instead of Empire. That's
Yeah,
traumatizing.
I mean, just seeing him, talk about it, like, "Oh yeah, 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 I accepted who you are, Dad, or
Enemies
who
go
you
boom,
work
sir.
for." And it's like, what's the? I was like trying to ask questions in the theater, or not in the theater, at the house while was watching it. My mom was like, "Well, you got to keep watching. You can ask questions later." I'm like, "It's just that's too difficult to do at this point."
Yeah, definitely. Dang. That's a good story though. I know for me, I was supposedly I was 3 years old, and I would watch A New Hope, and then when the movie finished, I would take the VHS out. For those of you that don't know, those were those thicker cassettes that we used to play and
Yeah,
watch,
what's a VHS tape? Yeah, what's
right?
those things?
What the heck is that? So I used to get the VHS out, and then I rewinded it, and then I would put it back in, and I'd play it all over again. So, but yeah, when I dig more into my memories, like I remember playing lightsaber battles, with my twin brother, and we would do all sorts of crazy adventures outside, and you know, saving an invisible princess, fighting evil Emperor and Darth Vader. I mean, countless Star Wars memories growing up. But I know I can never remember that exact day, but I do remember very vividly the first time seeing that intro and the scroll text just coming up with those big bright yellow letters saying Star Wars. And then you had the most beautiful view of these twinkling stars. This huge rush of excitement go over you. And then you saw that big, bright orange planet, which I think is Dantooine, if I'm remembering correctly. And then you had the Tantive 4 racing off as lasers were shooting at it. And you just saw they were in endless pursuit from the giant Star Destroyer. It was nonstop firing at it. And then it cuts to C3PO and R2D2, those two heroes that we love. Alarms are blaring. There's soldiers running down the hall. And then you get this shiver up your body, up through your arms and into your fingertips. You get goosebumps, and you know something's about to happen. C3PO mentions that they shut down the main reactor. You're like, uh-oh, that has to be bad. R2D2 beeps away, seemingly agreeing with him. The soldiers get to their destination. They're before that, white door. They crouch, take aim. What the heck's going on, right? C3PO throws us some foreshadowing. He goes, "We're doomed. There'll be no escape for the princess this time." A noise is heard, and then C3PO says, "What's that?" Bangs, clicks, all these noises are going off. The soldiers are looking around, and it's a Star Destroyer locking onto the Tantive 4. And then all of a sudden, everyone's face is all worried. C3PO and R2D2 run across the hall, and then that door that we were looking at gets cut open. Big explosion, smoke's coming out. And then when that smoke clears, boom, this huge, dark cape figure. Enter Darth Vader. The fear that you felt when you first watched that moment for the first time, you knew this was not a good thing. And I have to say, what an entrance. Someone so menacing was still so cool. I knew I didn't want him to win, but man, what an entrance. George Lucas told all that story that I just described, and that was not even the first 3 minutes of the movie. And they're still over an hour. It's 121-minute runtime. And that was all within 3 minutes. So to me, Star Wars has just always been the epitome of storytelling. Star Wars has a very, very special place in my heart. Yes, my man Vader. Sneaky Steve said, "My man Vader." I agree, man. I agree.
Oh yeah. I don't think there's. I don't think there's really a better iconic villain. I mean, there are obviously like from like the comics, but like from like a sci-fi movie, like just not based off like of a book or a comic or anything like that. I think that Vader's probably still one of the best original villains.
Oh yeah, by far. And I know people are always doing, those like, oh, who's the better Sith or whatever, but honestly, it's like Vader, you can't beat him, right? Is there a Sith with more power? Sure, maybe, potentially, but Vader to me is like, if you think of villains in movies, Vader is someone who comes up, right? Like he symbolizes a villain, a true villain, and what I think a villain should be in movies. So.
Oh yeah, totally.
Anyway, so George Lucas, as you guys already have heard many times probably, today released, 47 years ago today, released A New Hope. So that was May 25th, 1977. First Star Wars movie comes out. I'm going to do a quick impromptu pop quiz. Do you know who did not show up to the showing of Star Wars?
Actually, I don't think I do. Or maybe
I'm curious.
I think I may have remembered hearing about this, but I can't remember who it is off the top of my head though.
Anybody in the chat want to take a quick guess? Who did not show up to the very first Star Wars viewing?
Oh, actually, I think I know what this is.
I'm
Okay, let me
pretty sure
see.
you know it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything. I think I know what. I think yeah, I think I know.
Yeah. So most people, yep. Sneaky
Yep,
Steve got it.
yep. I was also about to say Lucas himself.
George Lucas was convinced that the movie was going to bomb, so he didn't show up.
Well, can I throw in a second dairy question there?
Yeah.
Do you know where he was?
Wasn't he filming Raiders of the Lost Ark?
He was in the process of writing or finishing up the script. Um, he decided to get on a plane and fly out to Hawaii with Steven Spielberg. And it,
And what the?
like you mentioned,
Uh huh.
you said it was going to bomb so bad. He's like he didn't want to be around this, hear the publicity about it. So
Yeah.
he went out to Hawaii with Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg I think that's part about the time he was pitching. Actually, I think he pitched the idea
Hmm.
of Indiana Jones to George about what he was thinking about doing. He's like, well, if I want to do it, I want you to be involved with writing it or
Yeah.
helping me write it.
It's
But
interesting.
yeah,
And look, and Steve just said what was funny is Steven Spielberg said it would be a hit, which that's true. I've actually read that.
yeah,
He was
I think
convinced it was
Steven
going to be a
Spielberg
hit.
was probably one of only. I want to say it was him and probably one other person that was the only people that was close to Lucas that said that was going to be successful. Everyone else was like, yeah, this is looking too good.
Yeah. Um, okay, so guys, for this segment, Joe and I, we decided to task each other with watching A New Hope. We watched the movie all over again, and we said take notes, and then we'd come here and just share our findings. So, what you guys are about to hear, see, these are just thoughts, questions, comments we saw throughout the movie. And I have to say, every time you watch the movie, I feel like you find something new. Um, but again, before we begin the session or segment, I should say, just want to take a moment, welcome in everybody. Uh, yeah, no, not the non-altered version. We have to watch the non-altered version, which I really want to see. I have to be honest, I still haven't seen the non-altered version, but I did hear. I know, but
Mike, Mike, Mike.
I did hear something very interesting that I'll bring up here in a second about the non-altered version and then how they fixed it. But yeah, welcome in to everybody. If you guys are just jumping in here, again, we're welcoming everyone right in the chat. If you guys have any questions for us, any comments, just go ahead and write it. We'll make sure to include those. Really want to leave this open. Remember, we need to get together to watch. Yes, I agree. Yeah, I know. Sneaky Steve said we can watch the version we were talking about earlier today, Joe. So hopefully we can get that scheduled one of these days. I would love to do that. Oh man. Um, but yeah, we welcome you guys just to again add to the conversation. Joe and I will be doing obviously the majority of the talking, but we're welcoming you guys into the show. Again, leaving this open for the fans. So let's see. I'm gonna be able to type in the chat talking. All right, thank you, Stell. Appreciate it, man. So before I start, Joe, actually, well, no, I'm the first one, but I wanted to mention. So today I found out that, and I'm forgetting the guy's name, but who Obi-Wan Kenobi cuts off his arm. They actually had his hands were hooves, and they couldn't make up their mind because they ended up showing like a wolf claw. So it got removed from the altered version, basically the non-altered version. So that guy that's with the Doc, whatever his name is,
Yeah,
and he has like the orange sleeve, right? He
yeah.
had a hoof, and then he had a wolf hand. So they totally screwed up, and they were like, "Oh shoot!" So then they went back and they completely removed it, and that's why when you see the altered version, it zooms in on the hand with blood on it. The arm cut up. That's why it zooms in, and you see a scene of that. Pretty interesting.
Well, I didn't
Um,
even know that. That's actually it was really interesting.
yeah. All right, so let me go ahead. I've got the first note here, Joe. So this is coming from the scroll. It says, "Yep, there you go. Yeah, Sneaky Steve just said he was called like Walrus. Yeah, it was something like that. I know I've seen his action figures. So, but yeah, so this comes from the scroll. It says striking from a hidden base, right? And I was just curious. For me, I was saying, well, does strike the rebels strike from a hidden base? Did that mean Yavin, right, where they were Yavin 4, or was that referencing like somewhere in Rogue One? And so I wrote like, Scarif. Obviously, they weren't at Scarif, but that was one of the battles. I was just kind of curious. It never really mentioned striking from a hidden base. Does that mean that the rebels went from Yavin 4 to Scarif? And I also thought, obviously that transition was pretty cool. We definitely have to cover Rogue One for one of these episodes, but the Tantive 4 was literally the ship that took off right at the end of Rogue One. And of course, if you remember Vader, he was very angry at the end of that.
Yeah, I kind of am wondering if there's more of a detail about that. I'm gonna have to look into that. About before. I mean, obviously Rogue One, they made it. I'm assuming that's where they were coming from, was Scarif. At this point now, since Rogue One's been out, but I think before that was ever a movie that was created, I'm kind of am curious to know if there was any mentions, I guess, in like scripts or anything of what that base or where that base would have been uh, at that point. Uh, like I also like I put in like what I think I managed. It mentions in the scrolls just like in that scrolling of the text, it's like the rebels have won their first victory against the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, is that contradicting what happened on Scarif though? Because technically it gets blown up um, by the Death Star. Um, so I'm like, they get away just barely from Vader. So I'm like, did they really win though? I
And
mean,
I have to say there, I'm kind of curious too that, um, Grand Moff Tarkin, he says it's let's test the fully functional power of this battle station, something like that when they shoot Alderaan, but they did Scarif first. Just I know we're working backwards here, but I just
oh
thought
yeah,
that was interesting.
yeah, and I thought it was interesting too. Is like in the beginning, like right after you see, obviously the first thing that comes in after you get the kind of the intro of the movie. Obviously, you see the Hanta 4 and the Star Destroyer chasing it. Like just playing the games and stuff that I played um, over the years,
Mm-hmm.
they're pretty in close proximity to that Star Destroyer, where a tractor beam I would think would have been potentially used. I mean, they're shooting at one another, chasing each other.
Right.
Um, I'm assuming that's what was used to pull it in once they hit the ship, and was docking it. But I always thought that was interesting too. And that's obviously I mean I don't know how much of the book that you read, or if you've read much of it at all. There's just so much content with that Star Wars archive book. I got both the one for the originals and one for the prequels. I thought it was had me thinking because I remember reading some stuff about it. I was like, I'm gonna go back and see what the plans were. Um, the originally George had drafted that the New Hope wasn't going to be about even I don't even think until Rebels it's just about the about Princess Leia have pretty much had treasure that the Empire wanted,
Mm-hmm.
the valuables. It was nothing in regards to a death a space station or anything like that. I thought that was just really interesting. I mean, obviously any movie or any kind of script that's going to be eventually producing a movie is going to have its transitions. Eventually. So I thought that's just really cool. I had that really started out with that part of it, and that's kind of also where I kind of caught where back then Luke would have been actually a general,
Oh
helping
wow.
Princess Leia escape with the treasure across Tatooine, which I guess desert planet, which eventually became Tatooine. So I thought that was cool. I thought that's quite interesting about how that all changed.
That is interesting. That's crazy. And I mean, I know for the hardcore fans out there, um, the Star Wars, which is his original take, was. I mean, I know we're gonna do an episode on that, just that alone, because there's so much material there, and everything is so different. What Han Solo's an alien, which I think you're gonna touch on that, but like there's so many different things that are in that comic. It's pretty crazy. Um, I saw a note here. You want to mention that asteroid one, or you're good?
Um, I mean, yeah, I can bring that up. I thought that was interesting too. Was uh, the asteroid that Han and Leia were part? That was in the pretty much what they hid in when they were being hunted down by the Empire, and the Empire Strikes Back was initially supposed to be written into the New Hope.
Oh
So that
wow,
would have been some. So that would have been something that they would have
like the
went and
space
hid it.
worm?
Um,
Because I mean, that asteroid that they go inside of is really the space worm, right?
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's supposed to. I mean, it kind of makes me wonder if that. I think I'll look and see if that was actually something that was written into. If they're hiding in an asteroid, like they
Mm,
thought they were doing, and did not know it was a space worm they were inside of,
yeah.
or not. But yeah, that scene was supposed to be initially written, like right at the beginning of the New Hope, when the Empire's chasing Princess Leia, or whatever ship she's in with whoever she's with. I think at that point that's when she was with Luke Skywalker. At that point in time, he was a general for the rebellion,
Right.
and
Right.
they're pretty much trying to get away from the Empire. That's how they hide, and I guess from after they hide on the asteroid is when they go down to Tatooine to just try to, I guess, cover their traces.
Hmm.
So I was like, oh wow, that's crazy.
It is interesting. Let me pull up here. We do actually have some pictures that we want to share. Um, just a quick reminder on these pictures. We don't own any of the material shown. We're using all of this under the fair use statute for copyright. Again, trying to do this non-profit just for fun. This is just us commenting on this. And then a quick shout out to Alexi Chistelin from Pixabay for the intro music that we used today in our stream. So let me go ahead and pull up this first picture. So let's see here. Go back to my notes. Um, one of the things that I touched on was the picture that we see here. Uh, this is Ralph McQuarrie's art of planets. People think that was like, I don't know, something they built up or something. That's a painting. The beginning of Star Wars is a painting. So I don't know how many people know that. I just have I brought that up because especially the original Star Wars trilogy, the use of real props is what made the movie, in my opinion, right? I think it added to the realism of the entire movie. And you don't know. You just, I don't know. For me, it looks real every time you watch it. And obviously, now with these altered versions, it probably even looks more realistic, right? Because you see like every time you look, you kind of see like the atmosphere layers on the planets. You know what I'm talking about? You
Hmm.
can kind of see that when you're looking at the planets. So I thought that was interesting. Also thought the accuracy of the stormtroopers. People always joke about the accuracy of the stormtroopers, but let's just take a quick step back and remember what happened aboard the Tantive 4. I know Darth Vader is there, but man, rebel soldiers are just dropping left and right. So, as bad aim as they have and as close combat as that was, people be dying left and right, man. Right?
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, I was like, they give the stormtroopers such bad rep. I was like, well, the rebels aren't that good of a shot either. There's more dead rebels than there are stormtroopers.
Yeah. And then I did bring up at the same time. So as much as many rebel soldiers died in the beginning, I also was like, how the heck did they miss R2D2 and C3PO who just happened to walk across the hall? Like all this gunfire is going back and forth, and they don't shoot them like at all. They totally miss every single bullet.
Well, it kind of makes me want to go back and see. Like obviously, I didn't. I don't. I know that. I mean, I don't think you counted. I know I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes me wonder how many shots there were fired between their transition across that hall.
It's like two basically terrible, terrible shots shooting at each other. All right. This next one I pulled up, Joe. This is yours, but we both kind of touched on this. Just Vader's helmet, and I said I liked it. It looks more matte black, but this is kind of a very close up picture of it. And Joe, I'll let you take that next line there.
Yeah, so I was just watching it. I was like, I mean, I know that the production uh, for this movie, they were limited. I want to say from watching Industrial Light and Magic series on Disney Plus, and for anyone who's not watched that, I would highly suggest watching it. It's really interesting. It really, I think, like the first 4 episodes cover the making of A New Hope, and so for anyone who doesn't know, um, George had to fight tooth and nail with 20th century. I want to say before 20th century to get the funding to do this, and so he was only given like $1 million to make this movie. So you can, I just thought it was interesting. You can see like the almost like the markings on the helmet, where you can tell where how the helmet was made from like plastic. But obviously this is a close up. In the movie you can't really see it quite that much. But I mean, when it gets close enough to where you can see like in this in the picture here, you can just see how the how it's made together and molded. So I thought that was interesting. I'm like, oh, I've never really noticed it more until
Yeah.
trying to get notes and stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see it. I mean, it's again like you said, it's not until you see this close up picture you see just how sculpted it was, and obviously this is what they had at the time. What people don't realize is George Lucas did not have a blank check, and he got whoever would help him to create all these things from scratch. So again, kudos to them for what we have today as the original trilogy. He did a great job.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention too, back when he's mentioning Ralph McQuarrie's,
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the painting of the planets.
Yeah.
Um, the Industrial Light and Magic actually covers, of him, and I can't remember the other artist that was doing the fill-ins. I guess you can call it. There's a correct term for that. You know, I guess you can say position of actually filling in around the scene with paintings. Um, in the Industrial Light and Magic, it actually mentions how they tried to keep Ralph away from doing anything that was around nature, like with clouds and stuff. There's like I can't remember the other artist, but he happened to be an artist that worked with Disney at one point. So that's how he got his foot in the door in the movie industry. So he's the one who's doing more the nature aspect of like more so for like Cloud City for Empire Strikes Back. But he's like, yeah, I always told Ralph just to stick to the city scenes or anything more industrial looking, because Ralph just did such a bad job with clouds. That's what they say in the series.
I didn't know
He
that.
said, yeah, so I thought it was interesting. I was like, well, Ralph McQuarrie, he has like such a wide portfolio of like all these
Mm-hmm.
drawings and paintings. So yeah, that was interesting.
That is pretty crazy. I pulled up C3PO because so one of the things that I thought was interesting on the Tantive 4, Leia sees C3PO and she totally hides from him. So it just kind of made me laugh because I'm like, they clearly know each other at this point, and we've seen that they're already around her even in Kenobi, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, and I'm just kind of curious, is he just too loud, makes too much noise, and that's why she's hiding from him? Um, and it's that very scene when my favorite theme, the Force theme, actually gets played in the entire movie. It's that very first. I always thought it was Luke looking at the binary sunset. It's when you see Leia for the first time on the Tantive 4. That's when it plays.
Could you imagine seeing her just like hide behind like or run like when she's hiding? You just hear him say in the movie like, "Princess, where are you going? Come back here."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I could that to me makes sense why she hid probably, but I don't know.
I saw you cut down the right down that corridor. Come back here. Well, I mean, I think it's funny you mentioned that because I found it interesting that like when Leia is obviously creating her message for Obi-Wan. I mean, obviously you're gonna have cutscenes in a movie. I just thought it was so funny, like you see her doing it, and then cut back, and obviously I can't remember what part it cuts back to in the movie, but then it cuts back to her finishing up. I was like, makes me wonder, was the message actually longer than what they actually show, or what
Mm.
Obi-Wan sees, because obviously Luke sees it first when he's cleaning up the droids, and R2's like, "Oh, what the heck are you talking about? I don't have a message," because obviously the restraining bolt's messing with him. Or R2's just acting dumb, like, "I don't know what you're talking about, man. This message is not for you anyway." So I'm like, almost think R2 was playing dumb because he didn't know who Luke was. That
Yeah.
would make sense, actually,
Yeah.
thinking about that now. Um, and so it makes me wonder if it was more of a message than what was shown, because obviously Obi-Wan's like, "Oh, it looks like we stumbled across what you're just talking about here," but it doesn't. But the way he stumbles across is just really the remaining part of what Luke started. So I'm like, maybe there's more, or could have been more. I don't know. Um,
It's
and
a good point. I like
I
that
mean,
actually.
the other thing too is like like Leia only shoots off one shot when she's hiding from the stormtroopers, if I'm not mistaken, and that's when they set the stun. So I'm
Hmm.
assuming the troopers were told, not to harm her. But I'm like, why didn't she shoot them more? I mean, she knows they're coming to get her. I mean, you would think she'd put more of a fight up, unless she just knew that they weren't going to do anything to her because she's too important of an asset.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, see, that's a good point, but I really think she was more focused on distracting,
oh, I guess
because
that's true too.
she
Yeah,
already passed it off to
make sure R2
R2.
gets away.
Hmm. That would be
Yeah,
my stance on that.
yeah, that makes more sense.
Um, and then so kind of with that said, I brought up then the rebel troop prisoners on the Tantive 4. I was just kind of curious. Are they all dead? Did they get tortured? I mean, because you do see some of the guys kept alive, right? But
Yeah,
literally moments later, you see Vader choking someone out and crushing their throat. Which, again, if we think back to the ending of Rogue One, there was no survivors. So, did he continue this rampage? Curious about that.
yeah. Like, since you mentioned that about him being on a rampage at the end of Rogue One, I mean, obviously, that being created a lot, later down the road, kind of makes me wonder why Vader even bothered to send the stormtroopers in first.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
see what he did. See what he did in a Rogue One. He just totally annihilated the whole crew on that ship. I was like, he could have just. I mean, obviously they had the technology back then to make, when the movie was made. He could have just pushed the door down and just went in there and like just doing the same thing. Tearing that place apart.
Yeah.
Um, so it makes me wonder, like, oh, you know, who knows? You may have been told, like, "Hey, Vader, you need to take it a little bit, you know, cool down a little bit, because he already got away from you the first time. You weren't able to stop him." So
Yeah. Hmm. Um. And then let's see. Let's touch on the escape pod here. Let me bring the pictures back up. So I don't know if you want to touch on this a little bit, but I just mentioned I thought that you had told me this was one of your oldest toys, and this is an actual screenshot. This is what the Micro Machines escape pod.
yeah, it's micro machine, yeah, pod. Yeah, it literally is. I think it's one that I was given as, I want to say, as, it wasn't a birthday gift. It could have came another, could have been given. I can't even remember if it was given to me by my parents or someone else. But yeah, uh, there's that one, and actually another one I meant to share, which I guess that can come at a later time. I actually have a miniature micro machine sandcrawler. I didn't get to
Oh,
share.
the see-through one, right?
No, this one's fully metal. It's like
Oh,
the front of it opens up.
okay.
Um, so that one's also another one I have. But yeah, this is probably one of the oldest toys I have in my own collection.
And then I know you
Uh,
wanted me to bring up this other one, the X-wing.
yeah, so this one I was given this. It wasn't even in packaging or anything. It was given to me just like that. I don't even think it came with a stand either. I know they do come with a stand.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I thought that was sick.
I
Uh,
remember these, and the stand actually fits over your index finger so that you can move your hand around like the ship's flying.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. Yeah, I
That
just thought this it being like see through and translucent was so cool.
Yeah, because this
Uh,
is part of those diagram ones or whatever. So you could see, because you sent me. There's a slave one. There's a sand crawler. There's an AT-AT. There's an X-wing, and then I know there's a Y-wing. I know
yeah,
I'm
so
probably
yeah, I
missing
looked at
one.
the Y wing came with the slave one. There's like there's two in a pack.
Hmm.
There's also a Millennium Falcon. I looked it up.
Oh, there you go,
Uh,
Millennium Falcon. So that's probably all
there's also
six.
there's a Millennium Falcon. They even have Vader's tie advance as well,
Oh, oh
which
wow,
I didn't even know that existed. I was like, oh wow.
yeah.
Uh, it, the one thing that's cool about this one, I'm assuming it's the same thing for I would say probably any of all the ships, probably other than like the AT-AT or people want to call AT Walker.
Hmm.
Um, you can actually see a person in the cockpit on this
That's
X-wing if
cool.
you look hard enough.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I
Um,
can kind of see it there. Let me right here
it's just yes, it's like a small little white figurine that sits in there.
with the what
But
with
yeah,
the
I had
R2
this thing.
unit.
So it was a uh, friend of my mother's who had given it to her, and I was giving it to me. So like, I've always cherished that.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome toy for sure. I definitely, if I don't have it, I want that. I love my X-wings. Let's see here, and then next up, I've got just the filming of Tatooine. I don't know how Anthony Daniels did not die. Like the picture I've got up here, you've got your young George, you've got the film crew there to the right, Luke, R2, what Kenny, isn't it Kenny or Kenneth Baker is inside the
Yeah,
R2 unit, and then Anthony Daniels is inside C3PO. I would be hot with what George is wearing too, even Luke. So I don't know how these guys made it, and I know we have a better picture of Kenny Baker inside the R2 unit later on, but this is, I don't know, just blew my mind how these guys didn't die.
if I'm not mistaken. I think this was like filmed in Tunisia, I believe it was
Mm-hmm. Yep.
something like that. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of a good point. Like, well, it makes me wonder if it's actually cooler than what we're thinking because almost everyone there's wearing
Like a jacket.
longer longer sleeves or
Yeah.
you know.
It looks really sunny.
I mean, it is desert climate, which can be a little misleading, especially in the morning hours because it's cool, but it gets warm out there quick. Just from being out in Utah and Arizona, that way it gets hot very quick. So,
Yeah. Elleran said they probably had air conditioners in their suits. I don't think the technology existed back then, because I mean, even if you think of like like a person that dresses up in a costume, like old school Mickey Mouse, for example, those didn't have AC. Like I don't know how those people did it. I don't know. Maybe we're just too spoiled nowadays with AC, but these guys went through it.
well, it got me curious because I didn't ever look it up when I was watching the movie, but I just Googled it real quick and it says that um, all the arms were made of aluminum, so it's obviously light.
Mm.
The fingers were made of brass, um, and I think everything else may have been. So the only thing that's made out of plastic would be the helmet, um, and the torso piece, the legs and the arms, are made out of aluminum. So that would get hot quick.
And I do know for a fact, I know for a fact that Anthony Daniels would cuss up a storm because it was impossible to move inside of the C3PO outfit,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just like tip over and fall. Like it was super stiff. It basically almost buckled his knees if you think about it.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Let's see here. I mentioned, let me turn this off real quick. So I mentioned too here that the first time that we're watching R2 on Tatooine, he's transversing through the canyons. I could be wrong, but just like from video games and knowing about it, to me it looks like R2 begins his adventure when he splits off with C3PO through Beggar's Canyon, because it's like really really narrow, and that's where Luke and Biggs used to fly the T-16 Skyhoppers and shoot the Womp Rats. That's like the whole, Death Star 2 meter thing.
Yep.
So I could be wrong, but I thought that was it. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I mean, that would make sense. I mean, that would. I mean, I mean, obviously it is a canyon, so it would be cool if that was the actual location of Beggar's Canyon. I mean, I was just since you mentioned about him moving through there. I mean, I always say that's more flat, um, and more of a harder surface terrain to move through. But right when him and C-3PO split off after getting out of the pod, I was like, how is how's R2D2 like able to transverse through the sand so easily? I was like, it's just crazy to me that because you can see his legs and you see how big his wheels are on him. It's like you just wouldn't think that he would be able to navigate through that kind of loose material. I mean, I know. I mean, obviously, I know like in the prequels we learned that he has little rockets on his legs, so I mean that might be how he moved around. Um, that sort of thing.
That's a good point,
That's
yeah,
just
because I mean, you, especially as a droid, you go over the wrong rock and you're going straight down.
uh, well, I mean, the thing I forgot to mention too is like before they even crash, like once they come out of the Tantive 4 and when they're getting shot down into the planet, um, I always I noticed when that trip before the crash line, I guess you can say, I thought it was funny how C-3PO says like, "Oh, the damage doesn't look that bad out here." I was like, "Is he actually referring to the ship? Can you see the ship?" I
Yeah,
mean, I know it's docked under the Star Destroyer, but or is he talking about the Star Destroyer itself and just that what ship he's on? I was like, this is a kind of a confusing statement because he gets shot out and he's like, oh, it doesn't look that bad out here. This that's like right when he says that it obviously pans out and you see the Star Destroyer. So I'm like, I wonder if he realizes what ship he's actually on.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and it's the same thing about when they land like for R2D2 and them split up. He's like, I guess we were meant to suffer. My joints are all. I was like, he's supposed to be a droid. I mean, I was like, can he actually feel pain?
yeah.
And I guess to saying that now out loud, I guess they probably can because remember, um, is it? I'm trying. I can't remember now. You may have to correct me, Michael. Is it um, on the Jawas, Sandcrawler, or is it later in the trilogy on Jabba's palace where that droid's being flipped upside down and getting like burned on the bottom?
Oh yeah, I think that's Jabba's palace.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
So I guess they can feel because
yeah.
always said
That
droids don't like.
torture.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't it a Gaunt droid that was being tortured?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was a
Yeah,
Gunk droid. And they're like burning his feet or something.
yeah.
And
So
he's
I'm
like,
like,
"Ah."
I guess they can feel.
Yep, 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 yep. Let's see. And then I know you've got. I'm gonna go to the picture again here. I had skipped it for a second there. You want to talk about that? The inside of the sandcrawler.
Yeah. So this is just something that I just thought was amusing, just because, like I mentioned earlier, they were budgeted with $1 million, engineering in light magic, which was formed as part of this movie. Um, so I just thought it was interesting how obviously with a budget they had to just kind of be quick to think about ways to make this look more like a space sci-fi looking. So if you look at like this picture here, this one's part of, obviously a pretty quick scene, but it's throughout the whole inside of the sandcrawler when R2 and C-3PO are in there. You can see this dryer vents. You can see almost anything like copper wiring. It's all this stuff that you would see like pretty much in a hardware store these days. I just thought it's interesting how they just took anything, everything, and just threw it in there, just kind of give it that aspect of a feel of pretty much Jawas being, essentially junk collectors in a way. They're or scrappers, I guess you could say. That's because that's what they were doing. They were just scrappers and just picking up droids where they could if they found them by themselves, and then reselling them, like to this, to farmers and what have you, in on Tatooine. So I thought that was interesting.
It,
How
it
it was.
it is. I mean, and what one aspect again, they're famous. George did such a good job of just like using everything around them, right? But then at the same time, it's also a nice nod and touch because, like you said, the Jawas were scrappers, so they took everything with them, whether these are dryer vents or not. They took everything. They used it all. Um,
Well, it kind of makes me think too. I wonder if George kind of, I guess, got a better explanation about like who the Jawas were. Like, oh yeah, these guys are living on the planet. They just you know they'll kidnap droids, or I mean, I don't know if kidnapping is the right, I guess, question or white not question but right description. But I mean, they're pretty much finding what they could and reselling it for profit. Um, which you kind of later down the road kind of see more of that, like in the Mandalorian show,
mhm.
with finding parts and stuff for ships and stuff. So it's kind of cool that they were able to incorporate that properly.
Yep. Yep. I agree. Um, so I know that during that scene too, C3PO reunites with R2, and it kind of hit me when I was rewatching the movie. I was like, C3PO brags about knowing all these languages, but yet it's just ironic, and obviously we do it for the movie, so this might be just thinking too deep into it, but it's like kind of funny that he chooses to speak English with R2, right? He's fluent in all these languages, but he chooses to speak English. And again, maybe it's because of Anakin, because Anakin built him that way. But I don't know. It's just an interesting thought for sure. And then I also have the on that same scene, we have this droid. For those of you that don't know, this is a Death Star droid, and we were kind of like, okay, what's a Death Star droid doing inside of a sandcrawler? Thought that was interesting. So I don't actually know the story behind this droid, but I'm very eager to know what happened, and I'm sure he's happy once the Death Star gets blown up that he's not anywhere but inside of a sandcrawler. And then I also brought up this toy here, R1G4. He's one of the droids that gets sold to Owen Lars, and you can see that he's over there in the back left corner. Pretty big droid, actually. And I like I said, I have this toy. This is probably one of the biggest. I would probably say there's like 5 really big action figures, and this is one of them that I have. I just remember when I picked it up, I was like, "Who the heck is this?" And I looked at the back, saw what scene it was from, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Like I would have never in a million years thought about this guy. And they actually have him in Galaxy's Edge at Disney World and Disneyland. He's they have him by a gonk droid, which is pretty crazy.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
It kind
Um,
of looks. It kind of looks like a Dalek from Doctor Who, like
right.
the top part of it.
That's true. That's true. Um, so one of the things that I was personally curious about, um, Owen Lars asked C3PO if he can speak Bocce. I think that's how you say Bocce. So I was just kind of curious, like, what the heck does like Bocce even sound like? Um, and Beru even reminds Luke, and she's like, "Hey, get a droid that can translate moisture evaporators." So apparently, Bocce is what moisture evaporators speak. Just really interesting little tidbit there. And I really want to know why in the world uh, Owen Owen Lara says no to R2D2, but yes to R2D5, the red astromech droid there on the right. He says yes first to him and not to the R2 unit. I don't know. Is it because he thinks he's saving money? Like, what was the purpose behind that? Because they're both astromechs.
That's true. It makes you wonder why that would be. I mean, R2 R2D5 is supposed to be force sensitive, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
In the comics, it kind of just make me wonder that. That's a good point though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned about Emperor reminding Luke. It's like I thought that was funny because she says, well, Luke, remind your uncle to make sure he gets a, like you mentioned, like he gets a droid that can speak bocce for the moisture evaporators. And I was like, and then Uncle Owen's Luke doesn't have to tell Uncle Owen anything. He already knows what to get because he mentions the job was like, oh, hey, you got a droid that can speak, or he asks his C-3PO, can you speak bocce?
Yeah,
And he's like, yeah, I can speak bocce. I was like, Uncle Owen didn't even have to be remembered. I said, Aunt Rue's over here double guessing Uncle Owen remembering.
that's true. That's true. Um, and I'm kind of curious to looking at this. I see some of this is a little bit out of order that I did, but I think the next scene it shows Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen and Luke eating. Let me share that. Yeah. So I was just always, as a kid, I was always curious. I was like, what in the heck are these people eating? Now, again, this is not the best picture, but if you watch the movie, it honestly looks like they're at least eating rice at one point. You're kind of for a desert planet. I would be curious, what in the world are these people eating? Um,
Yeah, it makes me wonder. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of remind me of rice, so I like the texture of it.
yeah, and then I mentioned C3PO when he's getting his oil bath in the Lars homestead. I just thought watching it now, this last time, it was kind of like Han Solo being frozen in carbonite, you know? It was just kind of interesting to see it. Obviously, he's not being forced to do it, but when you see C3PO going down for the oil bath, it literally is like, oh, there's a little pre Han Solo carbonite bath there.
Well, I kind of was wondering what was actually. I mean, I guess from a like what it was actually. I mean, I know it's supposed to be an oil bath. I was like, I wonder what they actually used for that scene though,
Mm,
for him to be put down into.
that's a good
I mean,
point
was it
too.
like, I'm assuming it was just probably water, most likely. Um, More than anything, but I was kind of curious about that too.
Yeah, and then let's see here. We've got the Empire. They do show the Empire landing on Tatooine, and when they first show that, I couldn't find a picture of it, but it was interesting. Again, watching it this last time, when I looked at the stormtroopers that they show, they definitely look like flame troopers. They're sand troopers, but then it also looks like there's flame troopers on there. And then going back to where Luke is with R2 and C3PO, C3PO lets it slip that they came from the rebellion, which I just found that hilarious. Even though C3PO probably is like told 100 times don't say anything, like he's gonna get them killed. He's lucky that he got to where he is at that point. I don't know how he doesn't die. Big mouth. Um, and then every time that Luke is talking with Owen and Beru, I don't know if you caught it, but Beru just looks at Owen the entire time, like he knows because he's.
Oh yeah,
This is like the
uh,
whole conversation of Luke wanting to get out, and he's like, I don't want to stay for another season, and Beru just looks at Owen. I was like, damn, like she knows, she knows, he knows, but they won't say anything.
like I think like her first looks like oh Chucky mushrooms kind of thing. Like oh crap, he's gonna
He's gonna do what
uh,
his dad did.
yeah, he's gonna find out like after uh he's he was a friend of your father's. That's when he mentions about about Ben. And, about the choice being properties of old Ben Kenobi, and like he's like he's like yeah, I wonder if he means old Obi-Wan Kenobi. I wonder if he means old Ben. And he's like, oh no, Obi-Wan died with your father. Like, oh, you knew my father? And then Bird's like, come on now, you gotta have to tell him the truth eventually. Now. Come on, can't be just messing around. Like, he is going to have to find out the truth eventually. It kind of makes me wonder too, saying that now. I was like, I wonder how that conversation would have worked out if you know obviously after that, that's when C3PO is like, oh, I'm sorry, like he couldn't find C3PO. He's like, so I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen to me. That's when he goes to look for R2D2.
Hmm.
Kind of makes me wonder that conversation would have been like if Uncle Owen and Emperor didn't get killed, and he goes to see Obi-Wan, and he goes back and he says, hey. Obi-Wan, Ben, Ben's not, that's not his real name. His name's that's Obi-Wan who you told me he died with my dad. What the hell's going on?
Hmm.
What's the dealio here? He told me that my dad was, in the Clone Wars and all this stuff. Like, I makes me wonder what that conversation would have been with Uncle Owen.
It would have been
Um,
interesting. He still would have. Luke would have still left. I think, no matter
oh
what.
yeah, he totally would have left. He's like, so you've been lying to me this whole time. I'm getting the crap out of here. I mean, I can see that unfolding,
Mm.
uh, sort of thing. Like, I
Um.
mean, it kind of makes you wonder what kind of relationship he had
Hmm.
with them both, because obviously when he comes back and finds them, they've been obviously killed. It makes me wonder, how close he was with them, because he didn't. I mean, obviously he was upset about it, but I mean, if I would have came back home and the whole place was on fire and pretty much the two people that un, unknown to him is not his real family. Like he knows her aunt and uncle, but his pretty much raised him his whole life. I mean, you would think I'd be a little bit more uh, distraughted by it, which he wasn't. Like I said, he's upset, but he's like not like. I guess obviously there's not much more you can do either. Kind of like what Obi-Wan said.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. I know I mentioned here. I just also thought C-3PO was hilarious to see him driving the land speeder when they're looking for R2. Did you catch that?
Actually, no, I didn't.
Yeah, C-3PO is the one who's driving. It's not Luke. Luke is using the binoculars and looking around while C-3PO is driving the land speeder. So, um, I also wanted to know when Luke is searching for R2, does Obi-Wan see Luke or does he sense Luke? Like how is he so close to Luke when Luke is attacked? Because obviously that happens pretty quickly. And we saw in Kenobi, he obviously always kept a close eye to Luke, a close eye on Luke. But you know, this is kind of like a random day. What was he? What was he doing? He sensed Luke. I'm assuming it was that.
He must have. I mean, I would think so. I mean, that's a good question. Along top of what I was wondering too is like, you see the scene when he's looking for R2D2. You see the scene where the Sand People or the Tuscans get up on the top of the canyon and try to, we're going to shoot at his land speeder, but do not do it. So I'm like, why didn't they shoot at him? I wonder if they know that he's looking for R2D2 and they're going to probably have a better opportunity of attacking him,
Yeah,
you know, that kind of thing. So I was thinking about that as well.
yeah. It's a very interesting scene. And I also bring up that same scene when Luke is attacked. Um, Obi Wan when he like has his hand over Luke. I was kind of curious. Does he use like a force heal, or was he just checking to see if Luke's alive? You know. Uh, and of course, that's where we get the infamous "Hello there," and also Obi Wan Kenobi. Now, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. I love Alec Guinness as Obi Wan Kenobi. Did such a great job. It's honestly a shame we didn't get more of him. And obviously C3PO during the whole scene is like beyond dramatic, but it really adds to like the humor that Star Wars has in it, right? He says, "Leave me here, Master Luke, after being attacked by the Sand People." Like it's just it's so funny to see him just, have this ultimate like go on without me. He
Just,
sets the precedence there in that scene that he's going to be destroyed like split up many times.
just leave me here to die. I mean, that's why I kind of don't think. I see he must have some major past trauma, traumatic, like things that happened to me. I mean, obviously we don't know it at that point in time, but obviously in Revenge of the Sith, they get their memory wiped.
Mm,
Now I don't know how much of that if it's fully wiped at that point, or if it's just
Well,
wiped to it back to a certain point.
C3PO gets his entire memory wiped, but
Does
R2
R two
does
D two
not.
does not?
R2 does not. So R2 is the
Oh, okay.
only one that really knows the full story. Which is kind of sad because if you think about it, these are all humans, and then when they pass on, R2 is still around and he knows everything. It's kind of sad. Poor R2 is probably traumatized.
So it makes me.
Just saying.
Well, that being the case, that makes me wonder what would have happened between after the Revenge of the Sith up to point of A New Hope was 19 years between the two. So obviously, I know C-3PO mentions to Luke that they've seen a lot of stuff with the rebellion. Like you mentioned earlier, he let us slip that they're part of the rebellion.
Yeah.
Um, so it makes me wonder if he's seen some crazy stuff. You just don't worry about me. Just leave me here to die. You gotta go on without me, sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, this was interesting. So this is now they're inside Obi-Wan's house or den, whatever you want to call it. C3PO's head goes down when he says, "If you don't need me, I'll close down, Master Luke." And his head goes down, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi starts talking about Anakin, and then when it shows Obi-Wan passing the lightsaber to Luke, you see C3PO's head is back up. It was just, it was like one of those things I just caught. It was so silly, but I was like, oh, look, he's asleep. Now he's awake. And then the other thing is probably, in my opinion, one of the best lines that they had for one of the trailers for Revenge of the Sith. And actually, they did a trailer for a New Hope after Revenge of the Sith. They use this line, and it's when Obi-Wan goes, "For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi were guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, before the Dark Times, before the Empire." I love that line. And actually, I didn't put it on our little sheet here, but there is a YouTube I found of someone who did uh, like a little video clip, and it was when Obi-Wan saying that, before the Dark Times, before the Empire, and it says Obi-Wan Kenobi has PTSD, and it does an immediate flashback to Anakin, and he's like, I hate you. I was like, oh my god, it's like such a powerful video. I'll have to send it to you after so you can see it, but it was, very touching moment.
Kind of makes me wonder if it's one of the similar ones I've seen before, but it could be different. Sounds like it's different from what I've seen before. But yeah, like when you mentioned like the over 1,000 generations, the
Hmm.
Jedi were guardians of peace. I was thinking about how he mentioned about the Empire hunting them down. Like I know that George uh, connected Star Wars with a lot of different things historically.
Hmm.
Um, try to tie it in because he's just he had a love for that kind of stuff. So uh, when Obi Wan says that, I was like, oh, it kind of makes you think of the Knights Templar when they were hunted down
Mm.
back in the day. They were given a task to kind of give peace throughout our region over in Europe and pretty much the Middle East.
Hmm.
And then once the church, I guess, felt them as a greater danger to everything, they decided they needed to be wiped out. I was like, oh, that kind of reminds me of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. That's a very good point. That's crazy.
and I was like, I wonder if George may have got influence from it, which he could have, because I know he mentions that he does, like the lightsaber battles.
Hmm.
He got that from like I think old Japanese films.
Yeah,
Uh,
I thought I wrote the name of those in here.
like I know he tapped into a lot of like stuff that he grew up watching and seeing as a kid, and just being involved with uh, history and all that stuff. He just tapped into that a lot
Yeah, he
for when he made this.
he definitely pulled in from a lot of different sources. I know the stormtroopers. I say it all the time. The stormtroopers were reminiscent of World War II Nazi army.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too I was thinking about in that scene in Obi Wan's place is you know when he gives Luke the lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber to him. He's like, this is your father's. He would have wanted you to have this. And so he just kind of holds it, looks around at it, and he eventually turns it on. I was like, has he ever held a lightsaber before? Because there's not too many buttons on a lightsaber. I was like, I mean, there's always that fun, there's that funny, picture that comes around with him like looking down the shaft of it before turning it on. So I'm like, he just kind of like looking around, and I was like, and then he finally turns it on. I was like, did he know how to turn it on? I mean, he could have, been looking at it like, and then, like they show like those funny, images of him getting killed because of that. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like kind of makes me wonder like, is this way that everyone's like, hey, you need to turn it on the right side there, and
Yeah. Yeah, because Obi-Wan doesn't say anything. I feel like, especially being as careful as Obi-Wan is, to be like, no, like, don't do that. Don't look directly into the lightsaber.
be like, hey, well, here, you get back to me so I can show you how to turn that thing on.
Oh man, that is true. Um, let's see. So now we're fast forwarding into the Death Star, and Darth Vader enters the board, basically like the boardroom, and it shows like all the Grand Moffs in the room. And I forget his name, but one of the Grand Moffs is like, "Oh, the Death Star is fully operational. Like we have the full power of this battle station." And Darth Vader says, he's like, "Don't underestimate the power of the Force." And he basically says, the Force is stronger. And I think I mentioned it here somewhere in my notes, but maybe not. He basically says like, the power of this battle station compares to nothing when you compare it to the Force. It's something like that. But yeah, I just
Yeah.
thought that was a pretty interesting standoff. Like it shows you how deeply vested Darth Vader is, like how deeply vested into the Force he is at that point. I think that's it.
Well, at the same time, I was kind of wondering if he had any kind of conflict, or, it makes me wonder what his thought process was, because when he says that, he also says, well, I think he comes back and says, like, he says, well, the Force hasn't allowed you to get the data tapes that we need for this power, for this space station. And so I'm like, I was like, oh, well, you look at Rogue One at this point, and say he's got a point. He could have easily have probably just force pulled the guy running with the with the information on in Rogue One.
It
Um,
it's a good point, but I'm gonna say this. Although he's a very powerful Force user, that's a violent scene. And if you think about it, the fear, the anger, right? Just what Yoda says, it blinds him. So that would be my
yeah,
argument to that is the anger that he was taking out on all those rebel soldiers that he was murdering. He was so focused on slicing up everybody that he wasn't thinking, "Hey, let me just force pull this guy and get the Death Star plans back."
yeah. That makes sense, because it's kind of, when you say that, kind of reminds me of like Return of the Jedi, when Palpatine's killing Luke, or Force lightning Luke. He's just fully focused on trying to kill Luke, and doesn't realize, doesn't see Vader coming to pick him up and throw him over. He
Yeah.
doesn't foresee that happening,
Yeah.
because his focus is elsewhere. That makes sense. At the same time, though, it makes me wonder if he did have any kind of form of conflict, because if we go back to the progression of the timeline at that point after Rogue One, if you read the comics and stuff, he's at that point, Vader's already having conflict even before he finds out that Luke's his son, or at that point he has kids,
Yeah.
because he still has. It's kind of like the game. Is it Vader Immoral?
Yeah, Vader Immortal. Yep.
Yeah,
On
it's just
VR.
like how it's just kind of like that whole game. He's trying to find a way to bring Padme back.
Yep. Yeah, and if anyone hasn't played that game, highly recommend that game. Just like Joe said, it's called Vader Immortal. It's a VR game, and it literally is about Darth Vader trying to find a way to bring Padme back. Sneaky Steve, the guy on the Death Star was Grand Moff Tag. There you go. Yep, Grand Moff Tag.
Grand Moff Tech.
Grand Moff Tag. And the Grand Moffs, we're gonna touch on this in a whole other episode, I know, but the Grand Moffs, very, very interesting. Joe and I have come across a series of 6 books, which was brought down to 2 trilogies of what would have been after Return of the Jedi. It's a different take, and it's about the search of Darth Vader's glove and what who ends up leading it. There are these wizard emperor type deals, but it's a lot of Grand Moffs. And there's even a guy called Triclops who has a third eye, uh, which is pretty interesting. But we'll touch on that in another episode. Um, let's see. And Sneaky Steve says, "What's cool is he survived the Death Star explosion, and he gets brought back in the Darth Vader
Uh,
comics." I didn't know that.
Thank you, Sneaky Steve, because actually I was just looking that up. Kid you not, when you mentioned his name, I couldn't remember his name, but when you mentioned that, uh, I actually just looked it up and was like, well, all the Grand Moffs are technically in that one room, a conference room, I guess you can say,
Are gone.
talking about the Death Star, about how they're going to get these planes back since they've been stolen. I'm like, I was like, okay, so did they all get killed on the Death Star when it blew up? So that answers my question there. I didn't realize that. I
That's
imagine
pretty
there's
crazy.
probably other ones that also survived as well. I would assume
Yeah.
because they just weren't on it when it happened.
And so at this point in the movie, we flash back to or well, not flashback, but transition back to Tatooine, and we see the vicious death of Owen and Beru. And I I made sure I wrote vicious because it was insane. Uh, it was. I mean, I hate when I see this joke, and I have laughed at it, but it's Owen and Beru Lars as action figures, but it's just 2 skeletons. Oh my god, it's so bad, bro. So bad. But some jackass out there decided to do that as a meme, and man, I know someone would probably buy that. So it's totally messed up. But and then we see oh, let me. I think this one's out of order here, but let me move this note out real quick. Ben, C3PO, R2 are burning Jawas when Luke returns from the Lars homestead. And I just thought that that was a nice little touch that he did that in a way to honor them. So he honored Owen and Beru Lars. And it's the same way if you think of the end of episode 1, they cremate Qui-Gon Jinn, right? So it's the way that they honor the Jedi when they pass away. And he did that for the Jawas and Owen and Beru's corpse. Man, that's sad. Steve said, I just started reading the Star Wars comics and had just finished that part. Oh, there you go. That's awesome. See, that's why I definitely want to pull you in, man, for one of these. And like I said, I've got that book that goes over all of the Star Wars comics. I'll have to see up to what year, but
You
it
know,
goes into quite a bit of detail.
thinking about that too was the Grandma Tag. He's the one who said that this is the you know what did he say? Like this is like the pretty much no other rebellion or any systems going to try to come against us now since we have this. We can really show them who's boss essentially.
Yeah.
You know, makes me wonder what his thoughts were after it blew up. He's like, he's like, probably thinking like, oh damn, if Vader was right, man. He's like, I mean, I can only imagine what their thoughts would have been after that happened. It's like one of a million of that happening.
See, it's
Uh,
yeah. I see here it says so he says, and what of the rebellion? If the rebels have obtained a complete technical reading of the station, it is possible, however unlikely, they might find a weakness and exploit it. And then Admiral Mahdi is the one who says any attack made by the rebels against the station would be a useless gesture, no matter what technical data they have obtained. This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
okay, yeah, yeah. So that makes me just wonder if the people in that room would have been thinking like the ones who survived or weren't on the Death Star when it
And
was destroyed.
it's interesting here because I just read this too. Grand Moff Tarkin says this bickering is pointless. Lord Vader will provide us with the location of the Rebel Fortress by the time the station is operational. We will then crush the rebellion with one swift stroke. It just, I know that Anakin respected Grand Moff Tarkin in Clone Wars, but they also got at each other's throats, and you kind of see that too. Even in he didn't like having to answer to him. You kind of see that in A New Hope, but it's interesting that he says again, there's a level of respect there, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And yeah, no, General Tag goes on to say, until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. The Rebel Alliance is too well equipped. They're more dangerous than you realize.
Okay, so yeah, so he wasn't second thinking the rebels' ability to do something.
No, he wasn't. Let's see. Joe, I've got notes here that you have. Obi-Wan doesn't run.
Oh, it's like yeah. So when Obi-Wan's, when Luke kind of puts the pieces together about about tracking the droids, and as he found out who um, the Jawa sold the droids to, then they know that that's back means back home. So um, I know that it's just funny that Luke, that Obi-Wan didn't. I mean, he tries, to say no, don't go, and that's kind of the end of it. He doesn't try to run after or try to stop him further than that. So I guess he's just trying to make sure that Luke's kind of learns I guess kind of deals with it in his own way.
Yeah.
Uh, and I guess that the other thing too is like obviously Owen and Burrow were burnt um, by flame troop, from flame troopers. So I kind of wonder if there's more of if there's more of a if they thought they were traitors to the Empire, if they were working with the rebellion, not just knowing it, or why not just simply just shoot them? Why burn them?
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering about that as well. It's like it makes me wonder if they just thought that they were simply just working with the rebellion.
Man, Empire is bad, right? Dark Side Joe?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I kind of look at it this way. I mean, the rebellion did blow up a space station that had all these stormtroopers just trying to make a living and just trying to go home and have a beer. Like, mommy, daddy, when's dad coming back? Oh, he's not coming back now because he's in millions of smithereens and floating in space. Thanks to this one, you know, good kid that has this invisible power.
Uh,
You know,
don't worry, Steve's with you. He says to me, it's the Jedi that are evil.
poor Stormtrooper Gary. He just didn't make it.
Gary did not make it out of the Death Star. He done blown up. Let me go back to our pictures. There's this scene here that which is in the altered version. This is actually part of a deleted scene. And I thought it was really cool because if we ignore all the droids that are here, what is the ship that's in the back on Tatooine? This is right as Luke and Obi-Wan are going into Mos Eisley. You see this rebel transport. I thought it was the coolest thing ever because I'm like, wow, like what is a rebel transport doing on Tatooine? I mean, then again, you could have some rebels, I guess, on Tatooine, but it's not something that would have occurred to me. It's the one planet that you don't suspect it. And
That could be
then
true.
I mentioned here too, just I absolutely love Obi-Wan Kenobi's comment, which I think it's a lot of people's favorites when he says, "You'll not find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy." When he's talking about Mos Eisley. Thought that was cool. Now we got the cantina scene next. So Joe, you're questioning.
Well, I mean, one thing because I was questioning was, obviously when they go to walk in, C-3PO and R2 try to come in with Luke, and uh, the barhead or bartender says, "Oh, we don't serve those kind. They're kind here. They're going to have to wait outside." I'm like, I was like, why can't the droids come into the cantina? I mean, is there a reasoning behind that? I mean, I never come across anything that gives a reasoning behind why they couldn't come in
Yeah,
to
I
the
don't.
cantina.
So this is something I touched on. Um, I have later on in my notes that R2D2 and C3PO were originally going to be diplomats. I think we talked about this. They're supposed to be diplomats or something like that, and humans, basically not droids. And George Lucas thought about it, tossed and turned the idea, and he finally ended up saying droids because for him, the droids were at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of species in the galaxy. And so I still doesn't necessarily explain why they didn't allow it in the cantina, but I know that that is something that George basically did put in there intentionally. There is a reason for sure. But yeah, he purposely made R2 and C3PO droids, and they originally were not going to be. Uh, Sneaky Steve says Hammerhead was one of my favorites as a kid. Yes, I agree. Hammerhead was super cool, and that's why we brought up this picture, and as well as something else that we thought was very interesting, and I'd love to hear your take, Steve, on what you think this is. But if you look in the middle really closely, that alien looks like the either straight out of Dathomir or or Utapau from Utapau when Obi-Wan Kenobi is hunting General Grievous. It looks like one of the people that greets him. But again, I also think he looks like one of the people from Dathomir. So just thought that was really cool. It's very hard to see him, but he's there in the middle. And that whole scene is just amazing. All the aliens, seeing all the aliens, it was just super cool. Such a variety of aliens. And again, this is literally why Star Wars was such a hit and a success. The cantina scene is probably one of the most famous scenes out of Star Wars. Utapau, it looks like him, but on Utapau they seem really tall. And I agree. I thought the same thing. It's just I'm like maybe he's just slouched in that chair, but I did think that was pretty cool. And then something else that happens inside the cantina that I thought was interesting to bring up is when Obi-Wan uses his lightsaber. We've all seen Kenobi, or most of us have seen Kenobi, and Obi-Wan is very cautious, very careful what he says, what he does, because they're hunting Jedi. Now, obviously, a lot of time has passed. Maybe he knows that the Inquisitors are no more, but when he uses his lightsaber, I feel like he's making a stand, and he's like, I'm done. I'm not running anymore, because he stays. He literally slices someone's arm off. You know that cops are going to come, or in this case, stormtroopers. So I said, I thought it was very brave, knowing that the Empire was going to come. He basically comes out of hiding officially, and he goes to this drastic measure because he knows how it's going to all end.
Well, that's kind of also what I was kind of what I thought was interesting. It was like, he stands his ground after he does it, and then he just simply puts his lightsaber back away, and then everyone's kind of like, oh, go back to my own business. Kind of just kind of reminds me of like, obviously like a Western movie, like when someone goes in and shoots someone in a bar, and then everyone's like, okay, just go mind my own business. But I was like, the scene as Jedi is supposed to be extinct and not supposed to be around, you kind of think they'll make more of a fuss about it at this point. But I guess where they are isn't such a big thing. Everyone's kind of managing their own business.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So this scene we also get Han Solo, and of course we have to talk about it. Who who shot first? Han versus Greedo. All I can tell you is in the version that Disney Plus shows today, I don't know who in their right mind would even question who shot first. I've always said Han, by the way, just personally. I've always said Han shot first. But when you watch the version on Disney Plus, Greedo either completely missed or he missed he shot completely after Han did. When you watch it, it's like a complete delay. So I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. But again, that's the altered version, so I'll leave it open. I don't know if people think otherwise, what your thoughts are on that, Joe.
Yeah, obviously that George kind of altered it to make it look like um, Greedo shot first because he didn't want Han to appear to be like just a cold-blooded killer. Obviously, Han always shot first before Greedo ever did.
Oh, hold on. I got something interesting. So actually, and I didn't know this. I don't know if you knew this. Sneaky Steve just said Han shot first, but Lucas changed it to Greedo so that Han doesn't seem like a bad guy.
Yeah.
So that would make sense why when the version I saw, I'm like, dude missed by like a million miles. Yeah, just what Joe said. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he didn't want to make him look like a cold-blooded killer.
I didn't realize that.
And it's like, oh, I guess they didn't want to make people, question, Han's character at that point.
Yeah. Um, what was I gonna say? So we there's a deleted scene here. Hey, Cerberus, what's up? Thank you so much for joining. There's a deleted scene that happens here. Oh, here we go. So Steve said to me, it made him more look more like a badass. I mean, I agree. I agree, but I don't know. I'm partial for the good guys, so I'm not the right person to ask. Um, but anyway, so there's a deleted scene, and I don't know if you guys know, there's a deleted scene right after this scene that we're talking about, and it's when Han Solo is, they've done the deal with Obi-Wan, Luke. They're heading to the hangar bay. Han is going to the Millennium Falcon, and I'll explain why this was deleted. Han's walking and enter Jabba the Hutt. It's the first time that we would have seen Jabba. It's the first time that you would have seen Boba Fett. Boba Fett was originally in A New Hope. And there was also all these other bounty hunters, and this is why the scene got deleted, is because there was like 6 Greedos. They had made so many of the costume, which I found out early this morning. The Greedo costume was made for a pea, like the vegetable, like a pea commercial or something, and they just altered the mask. Which I was like, okay, I guess I could kind of see that. But anyway, there was like 6 of the what do they call them? Greedo's a Tredodian. Oh, it's like on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, whatever species Greedo is, there was literally like 6 of them, and they literally all looked identical. And then I know we're gonna show this to you guys later on. I have some of the pictures, but it's interesting that actually Jabba the Hutt was originally a human, which is crazy. Radion. Oh, the species. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's gonna kill me. Let me just look this up. A Rodian. Rodian. He got it right. Sneaky Steve knew it. It's a Rodian. There you go. Rodian. It just took me a second. Trashdodian or whatever I'm thinking of is Watto, I think. So ignore me. Yeah, Rodian is correct. Yep. Uh, that's awesome. So, all right, sorry. So yeah, and then the other thing I want to mention, which I'll pull up this picture here too, is when they're in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, Obi-Wan, Ben, Han. If you look very closely to the top, we actually see the dice from Solo, which is pretty cool. It's something I think a lot of people miss or may have not caught. It's really obviously seen more so in Solo, but it was there from the beginning. So thought that was interesting. Joe, you got let's see, Death Star travel. Or no, just kidding. Sorry, I skipped ahead.
No, it's about the interrogation scene, like when Vader comes in to interrogate Princess Leia.
Yeah.
I just found it funny that she wasn't like really putting more of a fuss up, I guess you could say. I mean, I don't know if George just didn't want her to look like a damsel in distress or what, but I mean, I think shoot, you got a big tall man walking in, wearing a mask, breathing, and you got a droid coming in with all these needles on it. And so, and we're about fine, trying to get some information out of you. I'd be like, what the hell? Heck no, you're not. I'd be like freaking the heck out. If I was in her shoes, I just found that kind of interesting. But I also found it funny that even after the fact, um, Vader was not able to get anything out of her. So it kind of makes me wonder if it's kind of like similar to like with Kylo trying to interrogate like Rey in the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he tries using the Force as well as whatever's in that interrogation droid to extract information from Princess Leia. But I was like, well, I mean, I don't think at that point Lucas had any intentions of making, I mean, obviously Leia, I don't think was even considered to be like, even Luke's sister at that point. But it just, I kind of makes me wonder if he had any intentions of her being force sensitive, though, just because her being able not to break to give out any kind of information just shows how strong-willed she was. I guess as a leader, but I mean, she wonders how if she was force sensitive at all. Uh, in that I guess that scene.
I was
Um,
gonna say I know one thing for sure. I can't remember if it was in A New Hope, the book, the novelization, but it clearly states why she wasn't screaming and that she was quiet. She like didn't make a peep. She really was determined to not let this droid, the interrogation droid, get to her. Which I mean, watching this movie, especially as a kid, I saw that droid and I was like, oh hell no! It looks like it can do some damage, right? Um, but it basically explains like she was so strong-willed, like Leia was such a strong individual that even an interrogation droid wouldn't get her to make a sound. But you did bring a good point in like how the hell does she resist and Vader still not even sense an an ounce of the Force in her, you know? I thought that was interesting. Um, let's go back here. So I also bring up Grand Moff Tarkin, and how Tarkin and Leia do not like each other. He literally is like, "Oh, how sad I was to sign your termination order." I was like, "Dang!" Like he made it very clear because he basically signs to for approval for them to kill her. Uh, he does this boohoo. But now what's interesting is on set, uh, and I don't know the actor's name. I forget his name, but Carrie Fisher and the guy who played Grand Moff Tarkin, they loved each other. Like they were BFFs and were joking all the time. They were always laughing. And I have the picture here to show you guys. He was such a tall person, and the shoes. Peter, thank you, Peter Cushing. Thank you. I knew I couldn't remember it. He was such a tall guy, and he was super uncomfortable in the shoes they gave him. So they always said he told George, film my scenes from above the waist. So when you watch A New Hope, you never see Grand Moff Tarkin's feet because he was always wearing these socks and slippers. He wore slippers throughout the entire movie because he was so uncomfortable. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And then um, so Leia is asked, where's the rebel base? And she says Dantooine, and Alderaan still gets chosen to be set as an example. Tarkin mentioned something about disbanded senators, and I thought that was interesting because I'm like, oh, does that mean that they're on different planets? Are they on Alderaan? Like, I didn't fully know what that sentence meant. Just thought that was kind of interesting.
I thought the disbanded senators meant like for like the Galactic Senate, but I mean, I don't know if that's right or not. Because I think they still had a little bit of say, although the Emperor was already in control, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm,
And I think that was when they were trying to get rid of the senators from having any word at all. So that I guess they had to finally was able to get something passed where they were able to disband the senators altogether.
yeah.
But have I guess without them getting any interfering with anything, that sort of thing. I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to like the Obi-Wan series. How there was still a Senate still there, in in those scenes in that movie, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I found that. Yeah, I think that's what that's. I mean, I was also wondering too. I mean, since you mentioned, I was like, well, he's they say like, well, it take too long to go to go to make it a Dantooine to make it an example of this power, this Death Star. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, does the Death Star travel through hyperspace, or is it just going? So, I mean, I imagine it does, but it's kind of like you just don't ever see that happen. I was just wondering how does it travel through
Yeah. How does
to
it
its
do it?
destination? Um, and then plus, I was also wondering too, like, okay, once once Han and everyone on the Millennium Falcon come out of hyperspace, once they're hitting like an asteroid field, it's actually the remnants of the planet. I'm like, okay, why? Like, it's like, why is there only one fighter out there? Like, it kind of makes you like that's a good question. Like, why was there only one TIE fighter out there? Like, were they like going up there to check things out, make sure there's no potential survivors that could have probably tried to, I guess, escape the planet before it was blown up? I guess that could have been. That probably just makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting though. Yeah.
And plus, the other thing too, I was thinking to myself, like, once they come out and they're chasing the TIE fighter, going to try to blow it up, and that's when they start approaching the Death Star, and Luke's like, oh, that's a small moon, and everyone was like, no, that's not a moon, that's a space station.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, has Obi-Wan seen a Death Star before? I mean, I was like, I mean, there's no mentions of him knowing about it being constructed or being built. I mean, you see it during the ends of Revenge of the Sith of being constructed, and then there's no mention of it at all in the Obi-Wan series when he confronts Darth Vader again. So I'm assuming he found out some form of way with with still having some connection to the rebellion, finding out about it. But I mean, I'm assuming that's the first time he's ever saw it with his own eyes for the first time.
Yeah.
Um,
There is a book that I read, years ago when I was a little kid about, well, I shouldn't say little, but after Revenge of the Sith, and it was I need to find the series because it was actually really good, and it was all about Obi Wan Kenobi, and in that book series, he actually ends up bumping into Darth Vader, and like they do have a fight and everything, but in that book series, he does find out about the Death Star, Obi Wan, and I'm sure at some point he had to have heard something. I mean, Obi Wan spends his time in Tatooine, not just watching Luke, but also listening, hearing for rumors and things like that. So I would think so. Um, so now we're inside of the Falcon, right? Luke Skywalker puts on the blast shield helmet. Thought that was pretty cool. There is a mention in there that Han says they'll arrive at Alderaan at 0200 hours. So I was like, okay, is that like 2 a.m.? Because if you think about this movie, if they arrive at 2 a.m. and then they do the whole Death Star scene and they, go through, I'm like, yo, everybody's up at, I know this is kind of a stupid question because, who knows what time is over there, but it's like, yo, if this happened at 2 a.m., they're like at 3 and 4 a.m., they're running around with stormtroopers all throughout the Death Star. I just thought that was kind of funny. Um,
well, you know what well, you know how they're staying up that late, or I mean, if they were really, if it was really like 24 hours
mhm.
time frame, like like it is on Earth, um, I think they were using death sticks. You're gonna be that
Uh,
early in the morning. Gonna be traveling around. You're gonna be like wide awake and be nothing wrong. Like, it's death sticks, man. I mean,
yeah.
Obi-Wan tries to stay away from them, I think, but
have
tries to
you
persuade.
have you a death stick, my friend? Um, so this is the scene that I love also because Han Solo says hokey religions and weapons are no match for a blaster at your side, kid. And then I said that I thought it would be so cool, and I think I might have just moved my note, but I thought it would have been so cool if they had Obi-Wan, because that's Han Solo's talking to Luke, but he's kind of also arguing with Ben Kenobi at that point, and I was like, how cool would it have been if Ben had used the Force to set off his blaster to shoot the floor? And I think you might have found it or I found it that apparently that was something that George thought about doing. And I was like, okay, that would have been so cool.
Yeah, I think I came across that. It was like something in the scripts. I don't know, like it never was nothing filmed. Obviously, it's just something that was written down as an
Mm.
idea. I was like, that would have been freaking sick though. If they would have done that.
Yep.
Well, I guess not sick, but this would have, been really cool. But I guess George didn't do it because it I guess it doesn't uh, go with the Han's character progression.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I put the picture up too when they're approaching the Death Star. It happens for such a quick second, but you actually see there at the bottom are two space troopers, which again, just the nerdiness in me knows. But this is actually there are action figures of these guys. Like these are actual different stormtroopers. Whether it seems like there's a stormtrooper for every type, kind of like Pokemon, and these are space troopers, so you can see their little jetpacks on the back. And this is also a McQuarrie painting. This is a Ralph McQuarrie painting, which is crazy.
So were those added in, or that's
Yeah,
actually part of the original?
they added it in. The original, I don't think has them, or it
Oh,
has
okay.
just two stormtroopers. So pretty cool.
Well, I mean, the one thing I mentioned about this was I mean, I know they're being pulled in, and they know they're being pulled in. I was like, I wonder what was going through their hit like mind to that point. I mean, obviously they're getting ready to to hide in the floor and all that stuff. I was like, what the heck were you? Well, I mean, what? I mean, heck, did he have a plan in case they were found? Obviously he had this, compartments put in for smuggling, but I'm like thinking to myself, like, what were they thinking? Like, okay, we're gonna hide in the floor, but if we get caught, I don't know what the heck we're gonna do. I got my blaster, you got like a lightsaber.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. It's true, and that's where then my another famous quote that I love is Obi-Wan and him. They're kind of like bickering, and he goes, "Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?" And that's after they're hiding inside of the Falcon when the stormtroopers are going up to check them out or check out the noise.
And I found it interesting too is after that scene, let's see, they tricked the stormtroopers. I mean, it didn't take them. I mean, it didn't seem to take them that long to put to put the uniforms on
It
for the
didn't.
stormtrooper outfit.
It really didn't.
I
Yeah.
was like, oh well, they already.
Yeah. And then that's Obi-Wan also. So now they're inside that map room, and Obi-Wan says to Luke, "The Force will be with you always." And that's the last words that he says in physical form to Luke. And I was just kind of like, dang, what again, watching this movie again, I was like, wow, like he knows he's going on a suicide mission here. Um, and then we have Tarkin saying that the Jedi are extinct. He goes, "The Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion." Just crazy that they like have so much disrespect towards the Force in this. They
Well,
really downsize it.
on top of that, that's why I was. I mean, I knew from reading that there was plans originally to include the Emperor in A New Hope. At one point, it was like scripted. It was going to include the Emperor, but I think George initial thoughts were like there wasn't going to be a lot of dialogue with the Emperor. It's not going to be a lot of use for his character for like I guess story progression and stuff like that. From like writing a script and a story from that perspective. So that's the reason why he was removed. So it's like the funny thing that Tarkin says he's the last one of the Jedi's religion. I'm like, well, technically the Emperor is also a dark side user, so I'm like he would be also considered a Force part of that same religion. So I was like, it's like that George does not consider the Emperor to be a user of the Force, and just simply was ruler of the galaxy, and then just brought in Darth Vader as almost kind of like a henchman in a sense, I guess you can say.
I don't know. For me, it's I don't know who knows the Emperor. I feel like he's people know him, seen him, but they think he's just this feeble old man.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it makes. I mean, it's like I guess Tarkin doesn't realize the power that the Emperor has. He just thinks that Vader's the only one who has that ability. But it kind of makes me wonder though too. I mean, has anyone? I guess not, because I think about when Luke goes into the throne room in Return of the Jedi, he tells his guards to leave them. so they leave him, let him be. So I'm like, how many people have actually seen the Emperor use his powers other than Vader?
Yeah.
Uh, and obviously the people who didn't live too long to see the, like in the Revenge of the Sith, they see what comes out of it. But it kind of makes me wonder at that point who would have been known of his powers and that kind of thing. You know what I mean, and then the other thing I thought was funny is like obviously once uh, Han and Luke get to the detention level and actually break, you know, Princess Leia out. I just find it funny how it's kind of the same thing kind of back at the beginning of the movie how um, there's a lot of shooting going on but no one's being hit. It's the same thing with like that again with her shooting the grate and trying to diving into the garbage shooter disposal.
I'm cracking up over here because Steve said maybe he just meant Jedi religion. I'll
Yeah.
excuse you, Steve, for that one. Oh man, let me drop this. I'm just dropping our Discord again. If you guys want, you are more than welcome to join our Discord. Just keep up to date when we go live or when we're going to do another episode of the Millennium Couch. Okay, sorry, Joe. I think you're still up here. Detention level.
Oh yeah, that's too. Yeah, that's the other part too. Like during the whole time where they're in the detention level, going through that whole ruckus. Obviously R2D2 and C3PO are still in that room where Luke told him to stay. So it's funny is that the second the door starts being knocked on, the obviously 3CPO and R2D2 hide. Um, and I think it's funny how C3PO was discovered by the stormtroopers that's trying to play victim. It's like, oh, we they went that way. We need to. Can I go get my R2 unit service? And you're like, yeah, sure, why not? I just thought it was just kind of funny that hey, he's trying to play victim. It's like I don't know who these people are. Just being,
Mm-hmm.
included in the process, unfortunately.
It is true. It is true. I have to admit, I was kind of like, how do they not like take them away or shoot them or something? Yeah. Um. All right. Let's see. Let me pull up the picture again here. We got another picture. So this is Obi-Wan Kenobi shutting down the tractor beam. There was something I had heard about the filming of this. I don't remember, but again, this is one that I also know was at for some of it. It was a McQuarrie painting as well, which is crazy.
Yeah, so I know about this just because I've seen it. So I think everything other than obviously the tractor beam controls, um, and the stormtroopers, everything else in this scene is painted, which is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the green lights; those are not real; those are painted. And actually, if you see a still picture of it, there's actually it does exist. I've seen it. Uh, the platform that Alec Guinness is standing on there, it is probably about maybe 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So it is raised. So he's actually up there on a standing on an actual raised platform.
That's
So he
interesting.
technically could have fallen, but obviously they got stuff down below. If he fell off, he'd be fine. But he was on a raised platform. Um, there, and I think you said that you mentioned about the monster in the trash compactor. I see that you mentioned like a toy for that.
Oh yeah. So the Dalgonia monster, whatever it's called, um, it supposedly came inside of, I guess, that giant Death Star playset that's so expensive, but just the toy itself is apparently super rare, and I mean, it goes for a lot of money. I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can pull it up here really quick on the side. But I wrote that in there because I thought that was so crazy that um, of all the monsters or all the toys you could get in Star Wars, that one is rather rare.
Well, the whole time I was watching I mean, obviously that scene where they almost get squished to death, I guess you can say. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of brought me back to like that Sandcrawler scene where there's just all this junk in the water. So like again, I think that's just the production crew taking anything, everything that was left over from stuff they were making,
Mm-hmm.
um, to put it in there. Because I think at that point, um, they did most of the filming in London for the movie, so not a lot of that was probably affected from uh, uh, use of money, I guess you can say. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like what they were spending money on. I just thought it funny that just making sure they were just trying to use their money and budget wisely, at least with the filming aspects in London. Now back in California, if you ever watched the Industrial Light and Magic series I was talking about on Disney Plus,
Yeah.
like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, they were only given $1 million and they blew through that money pretty quick. Like they only had like probably less than half a million
Diane.
uh,
Okay.
left. And George, when he got back from London, he was furious. But they blew through so much money and had little to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I was watching the trash compactor thing, but uh, I was wondering myself, like, okay, you got a monster that's in the water, it's supposed to help eat some of that stuff. Um, I was like, okay, well, I was like, thinking to myself, like, I wonder what they do with what's left. I mean, I know like in the Empire Strikes Back, like when they're hiding from the Empire,
Mm-hmm.
Han releases the Millennium Falcon and just kind of floats in space with the garbage that they let off on the Star Destroyer. So I imagine some of it does go into space, but I was like, you're at this point, you're on a big space station. I was like, it makes you wonder if they use some of that for, you know, energy or fuel or something like that. I mean, I just kind of wonder. Are they are they recycling? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
That's a good point. I mean, I just, I'm laughing here because I'm thinking of like, airplane, like what happens with all that. So,
I mean, just
poop's gonna
imagine,
land on someone's X-wing one day.
just imagine there being like an infomercial like from the Galactic Empire says the Galactic Empire wants to remind you to recycle your, whatever you're throwing away.
Yeah. I'm sure that honestly, I mean, it is the Empire, so I feel like they did dump some of it. But yeah, I'm sure that with that technology they have in Star Wars' world, that they probably found some sort of way to recycle some of it.
Well, I mean, since you got this picture up too, the other thing I was thinking about too, because this is kind of like one of the things I mentioned was like, okay, I mean, I know that Ralph McQuarrie and other artists drew in the background a lot of these scenes, but I was like, is there a reason why some of the lights are green in this in the Death Star and the other
Yeah,
ones
I
are white?
I was gonna say I actually really liked that that note you have there, but the green light is from not the tractor beam, the
From
laser.
the lasers, yeah.
So I'm like, maybe like the power that they use to shoot out of the Death Star is there, which kind of makes sense since it's next to that reactor beam. I don't know, or tractor beam. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
was
don't
just
know.
kind of wondering about that. I was just kind of wondering about that because it's like
I didn't
it's
even
almost like
catch that, to be honest.
well, it's almost like well, the other thing I noticed is like the nice corridors where there's a lot of people walking through, like when Han and Luke are transporting Chewie as a prisoner, they're white there. Um, it almost seems like the back scenes or areas that are supposed to be like off, no one's supposed to be unauthorized access is where it's green. Like like on the Battlefront games, how if the Death Star maps, the same thing. If you go into the inner workings of the Death Star in that map, all the lights in there are green.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty much, with the platforms where you can, if you're not careful, you just fall off like I do like a million times when I play that game. Um,
Yep. Um, Lethal Company. don't
Straight
jump.
up.
Don't
I mean,
jump in Lethal
I remember
Company.
I remember playing as the Emperor one time. I was trying to float across on one of the platforms. That didn't go too well.
Yeah. Well, they make him fly. So I don't know. But yeah, once you're falling, you're falling. Um, so I've got a note here. Then after that, we start seeing where Darth Vader confronts Obi-Wan, and he already has his red lightsaber on, as if he's been waiting. So for me, I'm like, by the time we get to this point, clear intentions are here. That Darth Vader, he knows that Obi-Wan will not be getting out of here alive. Like that, he's like hell bent on defeating Obi-Wan.
I mean, I knew that Vader knew that he was there, obviously, because of after the Falcon scene. I guess you could say, like when he comes down, he says that he felt something he hadn't felt in such a very long time. And same thing, you don't see Obi Wan say anything, but you can see by his eyes, obviously him taking his lightsaber off too. Like
Mm-hmm.
after he does the tractor beam, he walks down that hallway. He kind of takes it off because he knows that Vader's there too.
Yeah.
He kind of looks around a little bit. I was like thinking to myself, like, okay, Obi Wan cuts the corner, sees Vader standing there with a red lightsaber on. Like, so what the heck is Obi Wan thinking at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, oh boy, so here we go. I mean, I guess we're going to be doing this again. Or, I mean, did he have the intentions of thinking he wasn't going to make it out? I mean, I'm thinking he thought this is it. Is he? He's already set Luke on the right path, and he thinks that he's going to be going down that right path. After he's gone.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. And I thought during the whole fight scene, I mentioned that the lightsabers are just like so sleek. And then I have to say, for me, I like the vintage, like the flashes of yellow. And it's kind of funny because that's why some of those original Star Wars toys from Kenner had those yellow lightsabers because that they didn't have the upgraded or altered version of Star Wars that we have today. And Vader, in my opinion, when they see each other, I feel like he's almost mesmerized by Obi-Wan. That's how I took it.
He's like, man, you got so old. See what
Mm-hmm.
happens. See, that's why I didn't like that saying. See that. So see what that son did to you, made you so old. Looking, but you're not really that. Because he's not really that old actually.
Yeah.
Or in like age that he's supposed to be. I mean, and I was kind of wondering, like, how come he doesn't call him? He always calls him. At least to my recollection of watching it, he always calls him Darth. Not, doesn't call him
Yeah.
Vader. He just keeps on calling him Darth at that point. Um, I always thought that was interesting.
Oh yeah. And then obviously, fight scene happens, and then Luke says no and looks at Ben. Ben literally just looks at him, smiles, and he realizes everything's come full circle. Like Darth Vader is gonna realize, he's got kids. Like I feel like everything just hits him at that moment, and he just smiles and turns off his lightsaber, and then becomes one with the Force. Just thought that was like it hit me really hard this last time that I watched the movie. I was like, wow, like he knew that was it.
Well, that's what I was trying to think. I was trying to think, did he turn his saber off? That's why I couldn't catch. I mean, I know he had his hand on probably the part of the saber where you would turn it off. But I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure, did I know Vader goes to swing, and he obviously hits him, which kills him. I was like, did he have his finger on this? I mean, does he turn it off as Vader's swinging, or does it go off because he gets hit by the saber and it kills him, obviously?
No, he
And
he turns it off before it hits him.
yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. That's what kind of confused me. I was like, does he turn it off right when he's swinging? Which I guess that makes more sense.
Yep. Um, and then I just put here the battle music from the trench run. I love it. To me, I thought it was played during the trench run, but the first time we actually hear it is when Luke and Han are firing from the Falcon when they're escaping the Death Star, and they send all these Tie fighters after them.
And I always kind of found it funny that the whole movie doesn't really show. I guess I made the note of this, but actually there is one like a hint of it. So you don't really see any signs of force powers being used in the movie at all. Like the only one recall now after saying this is when Obi Wan just makes a noise to distract the stormtroopers when he's on the tractor beams controls. So that way he can kind of sneak away through them. But I don't recall them using anything else with the Force, like Force powers,
Yeah,
like you would see later on.
they didn't really, and like I said, for me, the only other thought would have been when they did, um, when he looks to be doing like a force heal on Luke Skywalker
Yeah,
after he gets hit with the from Tusken Raider. So,
And plus, I think it's funny how you talking about like with the trench run. I think that was funny how like at the end when Luke's about to shoot his final shot, destroy the Death Star. How I thought it was funny how Han says, "Great kid, don't get cocky." Oh, I mean, no, actually, no. I mean, that's
that's
not before the trench run.
yeah.
That's during the Tie Fighter scene when they're fighting the Tie Fighters. He's like, "Yeah, I got one. I killed it. I killed
Hmm.
a or I destroyed a Tie Fighter." He's like, "Great kid, don't get cocky." I'm like, it's funny coming from Han because he's he's so cocky.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. But that's just, I mean, that's his nature. So, and I was gonna say, so when Han and Luke are shooting
Oh yeah,
the
that's
Tie
true too.
Fighters,
Sneaky Steve. Yeah, I forgot about the mind trick. Oh, see,
oh yeah,
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 I can't believe I forgot that.
damn. I mean, I forgot it too, but yeah, that's a good point. Um, but yeah, I was saying when Han and Luke are shooting at the Tie Fighters in the Falcon, the movie obviously it's a movie, but at the same time, I was like, okay, in real life, like, do you know how coordinated you would have to be? Because like the Tie Fighters are not moving 5 miles an hour, neither is the Falcon, and it's probably like, whipping left, right, up, down, and 360 degrees, and you have to be able to aim, and one person is shooting at the top and one person is shooting at the bottom of the Falcon. It's just crazy to think about it. Um, and then we hear obviously the rebel base is hidden in the forest of Yavin 4. I just thought that was really cool because we only see a few scenes of a base, but it's probably all throughout Yavin 4 that they have various bases. And I am such a sucker for the pilot outfit, for all the X-wing and Y-wing pilots. I mean, all the pilots. I love that bright orange outfit. I don't know where they got the idea, but it hits. It's fire. I want one. I have one, but it doesn't fit. um, and then during the debriefing scene, you see Biggs Dark Lighter, which is part of a deleted scene. That's Luke's childhood friend, and Luke has, it's like three friends, two guys, one girl, and it kind of is implied that Luke has a crush on that girl, but I could be wrong. Um, yeah. And then Joe, you told me yesterday. So what? 2 meters is how big again?
So 2 meters, like well, it mentions that looking at the Death Star plans that the exhaust port is 2 meters wide, and some one of the X-wing pilots, I'm assuming X-wing pilot, could have been a Y-wing, but I think it's X-wing, uh, said, "Oh, that's impossible." And then that's when Luke says, "Oh, well, 2 meters isn't much, bigger than a womp rat at least you're back at home." And so I think it was something like that. I was like, "Well, hold on a second." I was like, "How big is this 2 meter?" I mean, that's metrics. I mean, here in the states we don't use metrics; we use standard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, "Well, how big is that in feet?" So I looked it up, and it's 6 feet. 2 meters equals 6 foot.
That's
So I'm like,
crazy.
I was like, holy crap, that's a freaking big womp rat. A 6 foot, a 6 foot long womp rat, or it's like no bigger than 6 foot. I'm like, holy crap, that's a huge freaking rat.
Yeah, that is. And it's crazy to think because they show like in especially in the extended, or not the extended version, but these altered versions of Star Wars, they show womp rats. They show them on one of the early scenes of Tatooine when they're going into like Mos Eisley. You see a whole bunch of them just jumping around. But I'm like, dude, those things look puny compared to a 6 foot giant rat. Um, Even the rebels at Empire use metrics, but we just can't pull that trigger. Yep, that sounds about
I was
right.
gonna say too, Mike, you mentioned earlier about how uh, Han and Luke were shooting the Tie Fighters,
Hmm.
like how coordinated you have to be.
Yeah.
I think that whole scene was probably something. I'm not sure if it's George's idea. Most likely it was, just because of his thought process and stuff. But I think that was based off the old ball turrets they used to have on the War II bombers. I don't know if
Oh,
you've ever seen them or not. They have
yeah,
ball turrets that
yeah.
was, they would climb into they'll like
Mm-hmm.
literally just see through, so you're pretty much exposed to the airplane shooting at you. So you have to be freaking quick to shoot down airplanes during World War II like that. You were so exposed, it would be like the first thing that they would try to shoot, and take out on a bomber,
Yeah,
doing a bomb run.
that's crazy. Uh, Han Solo in the Rebel hangar. Han Solo says to Luke, "May the Force be with you." When he's like, "Hey, aren't you gonna stay and fight?" and he's like, "Nope, I'm getting out of here," and he goes, "May the Force be with you" to Luke. I was making a note here because I said, like, as cold as Han was being, he chose to say the nicest thing that he could to Luke because he knew how much Ben meant to him about the whole this force thing. Like, he didn't have to say "May the Force be with you." He could have said "Good luck." He could have said 100 other things, right? But he chose to say "May the Force be with you." So I thought that was pretty touching, and especially after he mentions that it's a suicide mission, you know what's about to happen because he's like, "Come with me, kid." It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I kind of think after he tells him that he's not going to be helping out, and then he like like you can tell Luke's upset, and that's why says "May the Force be with you." He's, "Hey Luke, May the Force be with you." I think I at that moment you can kind of tell that Han was already like at that point after he didn't realize he had upset Luke. I think he's already kind of double guessing, what to do at that point.
I put
That's
up
just
our
kind of how I mean that's at least how I perceived it, anyways.
Yeah, I put up our Womp Rat comparison.
It's a
um,
6 foot womp rat.
the 6 foot Womp Rat. So yeah, and then I just mentioned here, the Yavin 4 base. I just thought it was super cool, and you get to see all the different starfighters. So there, you've got the I don't know if you see an A wing, but I know you see the Y wings and the X wings. I love the X wing. It is my favorite ship. I think it's so badass. I could have 100 different X wings, and I would I would still not have enough.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I found out that, kind of like I mentioned earlier, 1974, the Emperor was supposed to be included in the movie, but was taken out, I guess, during rewrites. But for Yavin 4, it was supposed to be originally the home of the Wookiees, so that was really going to be the original, I guess, Kashyyyk, uh, for the Wookiees. What I also found funny was that it's not only supposed to be the home of the Wookiees, but based off of George's description of the planet, it's supposed to have been like Endor, because obviously Endor had the large trees. I mean, I know Kashyyyk did too, but how they're describing it, it's supposed to be a really, really large trees, kind of like what Endor had. So I was like, I said that's pretty interesting. I was like, how did that progression change with how the planet was going to look like?
Yeah, it's true. Um, and I know we moved now to the X wings going out to space, and I just make a mention here that when they did the filming, you know how they have like the X-wing, they're the all the pilots are rocking back and forth quite a bit. To me, I actually really like that. It just seems more realistic, but man, they shake Porkins up. I felt so bad, but I love, absolutely love that scene. It's probably one of my favorite scenes is that whole Death Star trench run fight. Let's see. Steve just said the one thing I like about the altered movies is the extra X-wings headed to the Death Star and some of the dogfight scenes. I 100%, 1,000% agree with you. Same thing. I mean, and this is why I love A New Hope. Another reason I love A New Hope is because you get your lightsabers, you get your space battles, right? You get all that Star Wars that we know and love. Um, X wings, the Y wings. You've got what Gold Squadron, Red Squadron, Gold Leader, and they're like, all right, let's see, what is it? That they're about to enter the magnetic field, and then that's when they show the X wings like rocking back and forth. I just thought that was kind of cool, but I also didn't know when they say they're entering the magnetic field, is that them pushing away from the tractor beam, or is that the tractor beam of the Death Star pulling them in? Just thought that was kind of interesting because I know the tractor beam can pull them in, but because it's such a big ship, it's not able to get each of the X wings, so they're still able to maneuver because the X wing is so fast, and the Y wing they're still able to maneuver through that quote unquote, I guess, this magnetic pull. Just thought that was interesting. And then also when they're doing like their like call-ins or whatever you call it, Gold Leader is wearing a green helmet. And I noticed that like they're like, Gold 2, whatever, standing by, and they're wearing totally different colors and there's different icons. I know that there's different squadrons and like they did have to use people from different squadrons. Like Porkins' best friend, I found that out yesterday. He was pulled in from a different squadron and then he got sick, so they used Porkins. Just thought that was interesting. And then something that a lot of people don't know is that the Death Star had 18 trenches. 18. And only one of those trenches is the one that had the hole. Um, and by the way, again, Sneaky Steve here, he added how, like I said, that they added extra X Wings, but they do say in the movie only 30 ships, only 30 went up against the Death Star. And to me, 30 ships against the Death Star and all of the TIE fighters and all the other TIE pilots in there, that plus the turbo lasers, right? That to me is like the epitome of Star Wars. That's like the good good versus evil story. Like who the hell would have thought that 30 ships could go against this massive planet destroying ship and blow it up? It just blows my mind. David
I
versus
guess
Goliath.
they,
Yep.
I guess they had to keep the better pilots around for something else. I don't know. Being
Uh,
the Empire.
okay, I was gonna say I'm like Luke is the best pilot.
I mean, it's a good point though. I mean, there's 30 up to the obviously the Death Star and the other one, so it's kind of makes you. Yes, it was totally a David and Goliath situation.
Yep.
Um, I just find it funny too that they go into the trench and they're making their way down to the exhaust port, and that's when uh, they tell Vader like, "Oh, we can't pick them off with the turbo lasers; they're too small." I was like, did I really plan out the design of this space station out more better? I mean, they just didn't think like, "Oh, we're not going to have any big troubles with small craft approaching and trying to destroy anything." I mean, you would think because the turbo lasers, they're slow at firing and they're also large. So they have to move them around, so it's not able to keep up, keep track with those with the X wings or the Y wings at that. So I mean, I just thought
Yeah.
that was interesting. Like there have been better design efforts made in order to keep this thing, um, well, more protected. I guess you can say.
Yeah. That's a good point. I bring up Porkins because this is the point where Porkins dies, and I said Porkins Porkins' death is so sad because he can't pull up. But what's crazier, and Sneaky Steve, you'll probably appreciate this because this is in your comics that you're supposed to read soon. It doesn't really give anything away, but it actually explains Porkins. So, yes, he is a rotund guy, but he actually earns the nickname Piggy not because he's fat. They call him Belly Runner and Piggy, and it's not because he's fat. It's because he actually is highly skilled at low altitude strafing runs. So he's doing what he normally does, but he's not able to pull up quick enough, and then ends up blowing up. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that it actually mentions it in the novelization. So in the book of New Hope and in the comic, Porkins is actually referred to as Piggy a couple of times.
And like right after Porkins dies, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, obviously, like, in the, I guess you say, real world, if you're like in an F-16 or whatever, what kind of fighter jet, obviously if you're low altitude, obviously you're gonna get alerts that you're about to crash, so you can eject out of airplane. So I'm like, how come like there's not like a suit that they like more so like I know there's like the one suit I saw for Y wings. It's got like a full helmet that goes over at least one of the fighters I saw in one of the scenes. I don't think it's a New Hope though, if I recall. But I think that one's for Return of the Jedi. But I was like thinking also like for the X-wings, you just got the helmet with the chin strap. I was like, how come they don't come up with a suit where you can, if you had to eject out, you just eject out. I mean, it'd be a spacesuit, so you can survive in space, the vacuum of space.
That's a good point.
Um, that's I was just thinking about that. I was like, well, how come that wasn't really a thing? Like, I guess the thoughts was if you're going to go and fight against the Empire, you're just not going to come back. You're just going to die. Damn it.
Yeah.
I guess that was the expectation. So there's just too much money involved with trying to, keep you people alive. The more people we add on to this, the more mouths to feed. I don't know.
Um, so a lot of people don't know, but obviously the whole trench run fight scene was super complicated to film, and it took them 2 weeks to film multiple ships flying. So when you see like three TIE fighters, for example, like Darth Vader's TIE fighter and his two wingmen, that took 2 weeks minimum just for one scene. What people don't know. I also make a note here, something I found out. Iden Versio, which is from Star Wars Battlefront 2, the story, from Death Squadron, I think it's called. She actually was supposedly one of the TIE fighters who shot at the rebels during the Battle of Yavin, which is kind of crazy. Um, I also mentioned the targeting computer. I love that thing. I think it's so cool. And it says when Darth Vader joins, it says 3 marks at 210. So I was kind of like, well, where is that? Is that like your, upper upper right squadron, or I don't know where that it would be, but I thought that was kind of cool. 3 marks at 210. Three bad guys at, I'm assuming, on a clock 210. And
kind of curious. I want to look that up real quick.
And I mentioned at this point, by the time Darth Vader shows up, Red Team or Red Squadron is the only squadron left at this point. So 30 ships down to only the Red Squadron.
So you want to know what 210 is?
Yeah, what is it?
210 is southwest.
Southwest. Oh wow.
So
That makes sense.
that's where those coming, which makes sense because there were, I mean, I guess that means that the
They were
direction they were
behind
heading
them.
down the trench is north, so it means it came from behind back to the left. So they're back behind their left, which kind of actually lines up to how they did come in on the in the movie.
Yeah,
That's the direction they do come in on.
for sure.
Um, and like mentioned earlier, or shown earlier, the toy that I have, the translucent X-wing, that was like always one of my favorite, ships
Mm-hmm.
in Star Wars. I would say before that that was always on the top. Obviously, like Slave One, Boba Fett's, Spitfire was always probably number two.
The
Just the,
Slave
the
One.
just the fact that you can see like you said earlier, Mike. It's like when you see them approaching the Death Star and they open up their wings. You see them open up and
Yep.
the firing position and all that stuff. It's like that's so, I mean, so cool.
Yep.
Just to see that.
It really is. Um, so this is now again the trench run. Luke says it's time to go full throttle, implying that they have to really push their X-wings at max speed. And this is what I'm trying to explain here is and you really have to watch the scene a couple times to understand this. Luke says it's time to go full throttle. It's not, hey, max out the X-wing speed. It's max out the X-wing speed because this is it. They already had one rebel pilot miss. The Death Star's in firing range. Luke only has two other teammates. They're outnumbered. They're outgunned. They're not heading fast enough for the last ditch effort. When you really understand what's going on in this scene, it's super dramatic. Like, super dramatic. The last time that I watched this, when I took these notes, I was like, whoa. I had never really like put and pieced all this together, right? It is a super intense last second win. um it is like, buzzer rang and basketball's up in the air heading towards the hoop. Literally. Um And yeah, for me, I tear up during this because I just, the music, and I'm just so into it. And Ben saying, Luke, use the Force, or and they're like, Luke, you turned off your targeting
Your
computer. Is
targeting
everything
computer.
okay? It's just so good. It's so good. And yeah, so the Battle of Yavin, it's literally won at the last second. Vader spiraling out of control. We're gonna cover that in a different episode because it leads to a whole bunch more. People think Vader spins out of control and like that's it. No, there is a lot more that happens there, and that also includes Shadows of the Empire, which I think is really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that scene, like what you have on screen, is actually I thought that was I thought it was so cool to see that because you see this scene in um I don't know if it's in the I don't remember seeing this scene in the movie release when I went to see it in '97. I think I seen this one on. I think they go in and actually remove that the eyes. But I
mm,
thought it was so cool. When I eventually did rewatch A New Hope later, you can see that the eyes of Vader right here,
mm,
and I didn't know this until I was kind of like curious as to why you could see them. Obviously, it's because the red lighting around Vader inside his Tie Fighter when they're filming this, but also Vader's eye lenses are red. I didn't ever know they were red. I never
mm-hmm.
knew that. They're so dark you can't tell that unless you see the lighting hits it a certain way.
Yep.
Um, so I never knew they were red. I think I think the only thing you see that where they're red is Rogue One. I think like in the scene where he's at his where Vader's at his temple
Mm-hmm.
or castle. I mean that temple. Um, you can see like a slight hint of red there. But that's the reason why they're able to be viewed here is because they're red and there's red light around, so it kind of cancels out things, so you can see the eyes. Um, so that's like probably the only time you actually see Vader's eyes in the movies.
Yeah.
So I thought that was so very really cool. It's like, oh, cool! You can see the guy's man's eyes. It's like what makes you. So I was like, that stuff's so cool.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense because I'm like I remember I have some Darth Vader figures that have red lenses, and I always wondered that. I was like, well, why is it red? I'm like, maybe it's like Sith or whatever, but it is. And even actually, when they're putting on the mask in Revenge of the Sith, you do see it too for a split second. Um, so did you know? I found this out earlier today. Did you know that Wedge Antilles is in real life the actor who played Wedge Antilles is Ewan McGregor's uncle?
I knew that just because I remember. I want to say Ewan was on a. I want to say on a talk show or being interviewed, and he said he just remembers going to see Star Wars when it first came out when he was younger because he said he was going to see his uncle in the movie. And that's when he said his uncle was played Wedge. I'm like, what? I was like, how cool is that? Like it's cool that he got an introduction to Star Wars that way, but the fact that he was able to come back and actually become the person who would play Obi-Wan Kenobi
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the prequels, I was like,
Mind
how
blowing.
crazy is that?
Yep.
I was like, that's so crazy. See, that's the thing that kind of bums me up just to mention that out loud since I was just saying that, like how cool that is. Now, just think about this. They could have, I mean, obviously Alec Guinness is no longer with us. He's been gone for some time, but like with the Rise of Skywalker, there was a lot of rumors that they were going to put, when Rey was facing Palpatine on Exegol, uh, they were going to have the Force Ghosts appear, like Anakin, Qui Gon, Mace, like all the Force Ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, that was cut out. I mean, if that was true, that's a shame that that was removed from that movie because that would have been so cool to see. But Wedge was in that movie. You know,
Yep.
Ewan's uncle. He reprised his role. When all the ships show up
Mm-hmm.
at the end, he reprised his role in that movie. I think how cool would it have been if Ewan could have been reprised his role as Obi-Wan, and they both would have been in the same film.
Yep.
That would have been so cool.
It really would have.
I said, and I mean, that would have just been awesome to have two relatives, that were evolved at different points in time in the Star Wars story, especially for the Skywalker saga, to be in the same movie together. That would have been so very cool.
For sure. For sure. That's without a doubt. And then Joe, I pulled up the picture for the ceremony scene.
Yeah, so I was watching obviously the end here, and I just started, obviously me paying more attention to detail than usual. I just kind of cracked up laughing because it's like, they're supposed to be, uh, legitimate, supposed to be serious. But it's like you have the guard on the right there, whose helmet's kind of tilted sideways a little bit. So I just started cracking. I just thought that was so funny. It's like he's taking his posture seriously, but his helmet's like on the side, like a little crooked on the side. I'm like, that's like, I was like, oh my gosh,
Totally
like how did someone
lopsided.
miss that? Well, I thought that was just, I got a little kick out of that when I saw that.
And then, so for me, I just said, obviously, I thought it was super cool to see the Rebel Army. I love the outfits, um, and R2D2's back. Something that people don't realize is that Darth Vader shoots R2, and he basically gets like put out of commission, but somehow R2 is back, so yay. Biggs died, which is really sad. And then when we get this scene, Chewie does not get a medal, which is so sad. And I know you got
Just
something to touch
Superman.
on that. You got
Yeah.
something for that, right?
I don't think I did, but I mean, yeah, that always bummed me out that they always kind of, I guess you can say lowballed Chewie for that. It's like, I was like, I see he's the one doing most of the. I mean, you think about it, he's the co-pilot for the Millennium Falcon, so he's doing the majority of the flying when Han's not. So I'm like, I was like, he's been through everything from the beginning of all the way through the movie. And I'm like, I said, how are you gonna you know you know do him like that? I was like, come on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then Luke's outfit here, I love Luke's outfit, and you can actually buy that. They've sell the jacket, and think the belt they're also selling at Galaxy's Edge in Disney. I know I've seen that. I would love to get one of these helmets one day from the Rebel Troopers. This guy's just got a regular baseball cap on. That's kind of funny. And then look at all the pilots they have. It's just crazy when you see this. You don't really put this into perspective. And these are the guys that are doing like what are they called? Like the traffic controllers for when the spaceships are coming into the base. That's what these guys on the left are. I don't know if people notice that. But anyway, so that there is the whole movie. That goes through all of A New Hope. So there is something that I really personally want to discuss. And I know Joe, you agree with me on the majority of this, if not all of it. But at the end of the movie, there's so much that happened. But I think what people really need to understand is that this really was the turning point for the rebellion. This is like literally one of the biggest moments in the story of Star Wars that we know today. The rebels began to grow, and we saw pieces of that in shows today, like Andor, Kenobi, even Mandalorian. Right? We saw remnants, pieces scattered everywhere, and they're all basically making something out of nothing. So the shows really displayed how the galaxy, and I guess you could really pull from even the Clone War cartoons. What is it? Rebels. Rebels is probably better, I should say. How the galaxy was like slowly suffering. They watched planet after planet fall to the Empire. Aliens and people of all sorts died left and right at the hand of the Empire. Everyone was under constant fear of death or punishment by the Empire, but the message remained the same, and it was hope. Hope prevails through everything. This movie literally symbolizes hope. Think of Rogue One. For those of you that know, what's the last thing that we hear in Rogue One? A rebel commander goes up to a door, it opens, there's Princess Leia. He hands her the Death Star plans, and he goes, "What is it that they've transmitted to us?" Leia turns around, she smiles, and she says, "Hope." Another example of this is in Jedi Survivor. For those of us that have played the game, it's the same story. Hope lives on. So I always ask, when you really think about it, you have to take a moment and ask yourself, what is hope? Again, we're gathering pieces of something, we're building something out of nothing. A strong rebellion was created by aliens and humans that came from every corner of the galaxy that shared a common desire to fight back and fight the good fight. These are the people and the stories that stood for a good future full of life, prosperity, and of course hope for a better tomorrow. It's the story that we all know and love, good versus evil. It's the story of the kid that stands up to the bully at school. This is, and just like Sneaky Steve said, this is David and Goliath, right? This is the same tale that we all already know. The Empire became so strong that they became blinded, and they thought their success was an absolute, and they assumed they were unstoppable. But just like Luke Skywalker said to the Emperor himself, your overconfidence is your weakness. So when I think about the rides at Disney, the movies, the shows, I always say, what is it that strikes us at the very core of our soul? What is it that about all the strings and the piano keys that are hit when they're playing the themes of the Force, or Luke and Leia's theme, Han and Leia's theme? Like, what is it about that just ignites our soul? And to me, I think that is hope. I think it's hope that even a group of two people can overcome something, and overcome anything that would have taken armies to fight. So some argue that might not be the best example, and I probably need to refresh my memory on it, but like Rose and Finn's encounter at Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. It was included, but it played such an important part. My hair stood up on end when they showed that little boy. I think he's a slave, and he uses a force to pull up the broom. It's a total side story, but it's so important because it revitalizes hope. When Rose releases those animals back into the wild, it's the same. It's literally symbolic of the Jedi. The Jedi are going to live on because the Force lives on. The Jedi were not extinct, and they won't go into extinct. The Sith and the Empire, they don't understand this because they're blinded by hatred, rage, anger, or fear. The Force is real to me, right? And I think that we can think of it as a thing, or symbolically. The Force can be seen as a mere manifestation of hope, and this all binds us and is in us, and it's going to be used to preserve peace and justice in the galaxy. So, like Obi-Wan said, the Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. Again, for me, that's hope. Hope lives in all of us. The music of Star Wars does to me what little else in this universe can do. The music pumps my heart full of hope that there's going to be a better day, and that there's something like this is out there. Think of every Star Wars fan that you know. Young, old, everybody wants this to be real. Not so long ago, there was a little boy that looked up at the stars with a toy lightsaber in his hand, wondering if he would be able to fly an X-Wing above those stars. And I'm sure that somewhere a little girl looked on and wondered if she could be a feisty princess one day, not a damsel in distress, but a leader of rebellion, saving lives everywhere she goes. All Star Wars fans, new and old, ask themselves just like Rey did, where's my place in all this? They dream of a world like Star Wars. And George Lucas, he did far more than that. He created more than a spark. Poe Dameron says, we're the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down. And the last three movies do a great job of passing on that theme of hope. That even our darkest of times, when all seems lost, if we hold on to hope and onto our friends, nothing is impossible. When every single ship shows up to fight the Emperor, like you brought up, Joe, in Exegol, it's breathtaking. It's probably one of the most touching scenes in the entire anthology. I've got here, let me pull up some deleted scenes and behind the scenes stuff that we wanted to share.
Kind of makes me wonder how many ships were in that scene now.
We're going to have to get counting. So here, Joe and I captured a lot of notes, and there's some pictures about, again, behind the scenes that we just want to share. Before I jump into this picture, one I didn't include was the opening crawl for actually Flash Gordon. So if people don't know, Flash Gordon was a series back in the day that George Lucas was in love with. And when you watch Flash Gordon, it actually is very similar to the opening of Star Wars. And it even shows a hero, a princess, an emperor. There's a lot of similarities. So if you have a chance, I would definitely check out the original Flash Gordon, and just to compare it to Star Wars. Um, so I've got, again, just some scattered notes here. The blockade runner, that model for it was actually 6 feet long, and the Star Destroyer that was captured. So the Tantive 4, that's the blockade runner, was 6 feet long, but the Star Destroyer was only 3 feet. So I think that's pretty interesting. Um, James Earl Jones, he only worked for 2.5 hours because they just used his voice, and he was only paid $7,500 for all the lines of Darth Vader. Just pretty crazy. And then, of course, the picture we have up here is of the trench run, which, although there's quite a few of those tiles, it's actually only composed of 6 unique tiles, and they just replicated them and changed the position of those tiles. So just pretty cool to see how they recreated some of these scenes. Here we've got a scene where the stormtroopers just struggled to get into the detention floor, where Leia was being held. You can see them that the door opening is so tight, and they actually stumbled, and this stormtrooper here even lost his belt. Like, the belt's literally just dangling, and I think one guy, I swear there's one guy who just falls in between, and they just like walk over him. So
There's the ammo, or what's I don't know what's in the belts anyways. I can't even remember now.
I don't remember. I don't remember. Let's see here. We've got what, the Gonk droid. So here you can kind of see the legs, but originally, and this is again in a deleted scene, the Gonk droid had a very different look, and he actually looked left, right, and then he ran off screen. So again, they were trying to be comical here, but Gonk droid was very different to what we got finally. Here's a guy putting out a fire. So Han runs down the hall, shoots at a stormtrooper, and then they turn around and start chasing him. The stormtrooper that he shoots, his chest plate actually caught on fire. I don't know, the explosion, whatever they had on there, so the guy falls. And so this is like the sound guy running over to put out the fire on the stormtrooper, which again, I thought that was pretty interesting. Here's David Prowse underneath Darth Vader's costume. Very cool to see who was underneath that mask this whole time. Kind of looks like an Anakin. And here's Kenny Baker. So this is Alec Guinness helping Kenny Baker into the R2 with, I don't know who that is, but probably one of the crew. And then here we just have some different pictures of them making Chewbacca's mask, or the alien mask. Bosk, right? C-3PO is just pretty cool to see, again, just how they made some of these. And you can see obviously all this and much more information in the extended scenes. What's it called? The extended material that they have for A New Hope. And then here is actually George seeing the R2 unit for the first time. So the actor was in there, and they had their legs angled, so they would be basically walking left. What's it called? Hobbling. There you go. That's what I'm. They're just literally be hobbling left and right, which is kind of crazy. And then they just covered it with droid parts. Here we go. This one was pretty interesting. So this is a picture of the Sand Troopers in Tunisia, and these guys were literally paid $6.50 a day for their work, which blows my mind. $6.50 for a full day of work. Have you guys ever heard the dialogue when Prowse was talking before adding Jones? Oh yeah, yeah. And I will say, like, when you hear David, when you hear him, it just doesn't sound right. Like 100%, we need a James Earl Jones.
Yeah, I'll put in the chat just now. I think that David's accent was more Scottish because he's like from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just listen to him. It's like it's almost like groundkeeper Willie from Simpsons talking.
Yeah.
he's like he's like, "What's the plans? I know I had them have somewhere."
Yeah.
So it's like
Yep.
it's funny.
Let's see. We've got again just some interesting tidbits here. So George Lucas got the name R2D2 from the post production of his movie American Graffiti. He was next to one of the people that was editing the movie, and they said, "Hey George, pass me reel 2, dialogue 2 from the rack." And it caught George's attention. Reel 2, dialogue 2. And it wrote R2D2. So pretty interesting. Um, and then there was a sound guy working on the film who spoke Zulu, and he basically had to tell all sorts of stories, and he would watch like to kids, and he would watch the emotions so that he could teach basically the Jawas how they should be like talking and acting. I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, Found out Tusken Raiders, the sound, which makes sense, is Donkey's brain. I just never put them together, but that thought that was kind of interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can hear that. I can hear that now. I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, see, here it is. So George took inspiration from Akira Kurosawa's film The Hidden Fortress. There's two
Oh, okay, that's
characters
right.
bickering in the film, and he ended up making C3PO and R2D2 based off them. And they were like I mentioned earlier, they were supposed to be bureaucratic characters, but George said droids because he wanted them to be at the bottom of the totem pole. And then Joe, I'm totally stealing this one from you, but how Tatooine was actually originally Utapau, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me that there's still a lot of planet names that have yet to be used that George came out with from his original scripting. So it makes me wonder if Disney's eventually going to use those, which they probably will. It's kind of like it reminds me of how, like in the Mandalorian, how Disney tapped into some of Ralph McQuarrie's original concept arts for some stuff that was they were used in Star Wars in the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it was like the ice spiders they used in the Mando.
Yeah.
That was like one of the original concept arts um, that Ralph McQuarrie had kind of used. Kind of the same thing with like the Rise of Skywalker, like the throne that
Yeah.
Palpatine's sitting on. That's also original concept art that was going to be used in Return of the Jedi.
And then I have a note here too, which is really interesting. So if you remember when Owen is like, Luke, I need you to do whatever. I guess he's like, I think it's when he's getting the droids. And Luke is like, oh, but I was going to go down to Tashi Station and pick up some power converters. So Tashi Station was actually shown in the Book of Boba. And a lot of people don't know that. And we actually see two characters in the Book of Boba, and they're Luke's friends from the deleted scene, Fixer and Cammy, which is mind blowing. So it was Fixer, Cammy, Biggs, and Luke. It was the four of them hanging out.
Since you mentioned on the deleted scene, I mean, I know which one you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, since you mentioned deleted scene, I was thinking about Biggs back when they're about to, have their battle
Yeah.
with the Death Star. Have you seen the deleted scene where I think it's the Gold Leader who comes up to Luke and says, "Hey, are you sure you can, fly this contraption me in the X-wing?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Man, I can." That's when Biggs says, "I can vouch for you."
Mm-hmm.
And there's in a deleted scene. It's like, "Yeah, I knew your father." He's talking about he knew
Mm-hmm.
Anakin.
Yep.
I thought that was just crazy.
Yep. The land speeder, I'm sure most people know this, but the land speeder was a car that had mirrors underneath it, and so that's how they were able to get the effect that the land speeder is just floating.
Don't lie to me, man. I want to see a floating.
The bantha, this is a very cool one, and this is very real. The bantha was an elephant named Margie, and she would play in a nearby creek. This is in Death Valley. Um, she would play in a nearby creek, and she was constantly trying to take off her costume. So they struggled with Margie the bantha. Um, And then this I thought was interesting too. If those of you that are on and have played Star Wars for the Super Nintendo, a Star Wars: A New Hope for the Super Nintendo, when you find Obi-Wan Kenobi, you find him in a cave. The people who made the video game got it before the movie came out, and the story that they got in their hands was that Obi-Wan Kenobi was originally living in a cave. So when you play the game and you find him, that's why you find Obi-Wan in a cave. Thought that was cool. The CGI scenes that we get in the altered versions, the Womp Rats, this is crazy. The Womp Rats are heavily modified CGI of velociraptors from Jurassic Park.
Oh wow.
And the Ronto, that's the one that we see the Jawa riding on and it kind of loses control. It's the Brachiosaurus from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I can see that now. Yeah.
They just totally altered it. So really cool that they did that. Chewbacca was obviously based on George Lucas's Alaskan Malamute. I think everybody knows about that one. And then the language of the Huttese, was actually based on, I'm going to probably butcher this, the Quechua indigenous language in Bolivia and Peru. Just crazy. And Joe, you got something to hear about Han Solo.
Yeah, so I know that there was a lot of concept art that was floated around, and actually, there's a comic. I actually would like to get it. I don't know if you have it, or I can't remember if you have it, Mike, or not. This the original like script, like
Mm-hmm.
back in 1974, that George put together before he kind of started modifying it. So, um, that's back when Anakin and Darth Vader were actual two separate beings, not one person.
That's
And that's
crazy.
when Luke would have been a general, but that's also where Han wouldn't have been a human. He would have been a green alien, like literally like a green alien. Um, and he would have been like part of the Unrealian race. That's what they call the race. I think there's an action figure that came out uh, of of him in that original concept. So I thought that was just really cool. That it would have been. Just imagine though, just if that would have stuck and they would have kept the cantina scene where where he meets off with Greedo, you would have had two green aliens fighting each other.
Yeah,
Or
that's crazy.
that would have been really interesting.
And you want to touch on the the Sandcrawler, how we avoided a war?
Yeah. So if you look at the original, or you look at some of the episodes, if you were to go on the internet, because there's plenty of, obviously a lot of these images you can be found on the internet if you do some digging. But the Sandcrawler, if you look at it, they pretty much built half of it up. So they got the tracks they built for it, and it's literally about the length of what you see in the movie, how big it was. And they built about halfway up, probably more so quarter of the way up, not halfway up. So, anyways, it was such a large contraption in Tunisia. Tunisia was having, I think they were having issues with Morocco at the time, or another bordering country. Um, and so, anyways, the Tunisian government showed out because they thought that it was one of the countries bordering them trying to deploy, military equipment. So it almost led to almost came close to being there being some conflict over there during filming. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that. I've got a picture here of the Lars's homestead, and obviously the bottom pictures from the movie. The top picture is literally a screenshot of one of the hotels. So you can see that they used what was already there. They didn't in Tunisia. They really didn't alter it. I have a second draft of Adventures of Starkiller script. Han's co-pilot isn't Chewie, but he's called Montrose. That's crazy. Yeah, I still haven't read. I mean, I'm sure you know about it, Steve, but it's called The Star Wars, and it's the comic book adaptation of what George had originally planned for. That's where like we have like a where we see Han is this green alien. It's just crazy. But that we're gonna cover that in a whole separate episode for sure. Um, Here we got a picture of Jabba as a human. Again, people don't realize that, but Jabba was originally going to be a human. It just blows my mind when we see things like this. And then again, oh yeah, we kind of already touched on David Prowse reprising the role of Darth Vader before they brought in James Earl Jones. You can also hear the voice of Greedo before they added the alien dialect. And then George released the movie this today, 47 years ago, because he knew that Memorial Day kids weren't going to be in school, so they could watch the movie and then they'd go back to school and talk about it. So I thought that was really cool and very smart of George Lucas to do that. And it worked, as we can see today. It brought in all that hype, and people clearly did not stop talking about Star Wars because Star Wars blew up. And then let me see. I think we have some other notes in here. Oh, Alderaan. That's right. Alderaan originally was going to be like Cloud City, and that's where the Empire originally was supposed to reside. The "I've got a bad feeling about this" line was supposed to be used in Indiana Jones, but Indy was always alone and it didn't make any sense, so George Lucas moved it back over to Star Wars. Isn't that crazy? And then Leia, her jail cell in the Death Star, it was 2187, and it came from a film that inspired George. And then from what I got, it was actually called 2187. I haven't seen it, so I got to look into that a little bit more and figure out what's going on with that movie. And then, yeah, Obi-Wan, this is pretty crazy to believe. Joe and I were talking about this, that Obi-Wan was originally going to survive his duel with Darth Vader. And then George Lucas thought about killing off C-3PO or Chewbacca, but then he felt that the heroes left the Death Star too easily. So he went back and forth, talked about it. Alec Guinness was obviously upset, and then they had a dinner, talked through it all, and then he finally agreed, but George had to explain that it added to the mysticism of the Force. It's kind of crazy. Joe, do you have any other fun facts there? Yeah, he was pissed. Joe, I don't know if we lost you, Joe. Okay, I may have lost Joe.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I was muted for a second. Um, you said the model. I think you mentioned like in the notes, like the model. Is that the actual diameter of the model?
Yep.
The Death Star or the?
Yep, the actual no, not they would this was all flat. They the
Okay.
Death yeah, the Death this is for the Death Star. The model of the Death Star was 60 feet, but the Death Star trench was 40 miles, which is crazy.
Okay. The reason why I was asking is because
Or no, the Death Star trench, the model of the trench run was 60 feet, but the actual trench run that they
That's
fly
40
through
miles
is
long.
40 miles long, supposedly.
Okay. The reason why I was asking was because, again, the Industrial Light and Magic series on Disney.
Mm-hmm.
When I was thinking of models, this is crazy. And this, I mean, I would have been blown away by this if one of us would have came across this. So, and this is I want to say back in the 90s. I want to say I might be mistaken. It might have been earlier. It might have been like after the original one came out, or in the 80s. But I want to say it was in the 90s. So, anyways, they had created the model for what they were going to use for the Death Star, like the actual circular, what it looked like from a kind of close up, but still it's like an actual physical model of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they used a little bit of it, but it was so fragile and got easily dirty and stuff that they opted not to do it. So they ended up trashing it. Eventually. I want to say like during production, and so they actually took it and chunked it, and put it in somewhere in storage, and then I guess whatever building they were in when they were filming the original Star Wars, eventually they moved out of that location and moved to a different location, uh, and I want to say probably a couple miles down the road or something like that. Because at that point, that's when after New Hope, Industrial Light and Magic got worked on Poltergeist, E.T. They started working on all these movies. That's what George was trying to do. In the meantime, it's like I don't want to lay all these people off. I want to find a way for them to be able to stick around. So when I come up with my next movie, Empire Strikes Back, we'll still have the same people on board. There were some people that were laid off because they weren't, treating them. They didn't spend money wisely, I guess you could say. So, anyways, when they moved, these people chunked all this stuff out to another location, and then eventually it gets chunked out next to a dumpster in the 90s. So some person sees this thing and finds it, says, "Hey, can I take this?" And so they're like, "Yeah, you can have it." And it's the original Death Star model
That's
that was made
crazy.
for the original movie. Someone found it behind the trash can, and like it was one of it was like a regular Joe Smo. It was one of the persons that worked for Industrial Light and Magic. He says, "Hey, are we getting rid of this?" Like, yeah. He said, "Well, you can just take it. We don't want it." So he got held on to it, and he's now lended it to a museum in California. You can go see it on display. I'm like, that's just so crazy to me. Someone just chunked it in the back of by a garbage can.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think, and I'm sure there's more of those stories out there.
Oh,
But
I'm pretty sure there is. It's like probably even now today. Remember like when they did the re-release for the 40th for Return of the Jedi.
hmm
Remember how being you were talking about wanting to get one of the end caps at Target,
oh
like it says
yeah,
Return of the Jedi.
yep,
No one could get them because Target was told they had to destroy them because if Disney found out they were giving them or keeping them, they could be on the line legally for keeping them. But there are still people getting a hold of them,
oh
and
yeah,
so these days in time, anything that's kind of post production is usually destroyed. It's not kept. Obviously you hear about actors taking stuff at home and keeping it for themselves, that kind of thing. But
that's sad.
yeah, yeah,
That's so sad.
yeah, no,
Yep. I've got another note here too that I thought was pretty interesting. Biggs Darklighter. George originally had him as Luke's brother, which is kind of crazy. And then he scrapped the idea because it was basically he was going to be like a son of a Jedi who fell and learned the dark side of the Force. But obviously, as we know, that was also scrapped. But it
oh
makes sense
wow,
because of his last name was Darklighter. So
it's like Dark Side Joe.
yeah, right, right. Let's pull this back up. We've got Acolyte. So this screenshot is actually a picture I took in Disneyland. I got to go to California recently, and this is the advertisement that they had up, which was really, really, really cool. So you've got all the different lightsabers there. I don't know if they're releasing any new lightsabers in the future, but very, very, very cool advertisement. And those were all heavy duty lightsabers. Now, what's funny is I keep looking at the one, two, three, four, five, the six lightsaber here. I don't know if you can see the picture, Joe, but looks like it's two pieces. I don't know if it's missing or what.
Yeah, it does look like it's two pieces. It's like it's
Interesting.
separated.
All right, so we've got Star Wars Celebration 2025 is going to be in Japan. That's April 18th through the 20th. If you guys are interested, the URL's there. If you guys want, you can just Google Star Wars Celebration and it'll pull up. Same thing, Acolyte. We'll circle back to that here in just a second. Disney World and Disneyland is celebrating Season of the Force. That'll be through June 2nd, just a heads up. And then we've got in video game news, we are going to be getting Star Wars Outlaws, supposedly August 30th this year, as long as it doesn't get delayed further. It does seem expensive, but I'm still excited for that game. Should be PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X. Star Wars Hunters is coming out on the Nintendo Switch, Android, and iOS. I'm probably going to be streaming Star Wars Hunters when it comes out. That'll be June 4th. So, Steve, if you weren't aware, that's something we could look into. And then we also have Star Wars Eclipse. If you haven't seen the trailer for Star Wars Eclipse, highly recommend you go look it up. Trailer was epic, I would say. No idea on release date or what systems. And then last but not least, Knights of the Old Republic. They're going to be doing a remake, and it's supposed to be a PS5 exclusive, but it might be released to PC. So there's that. And then The Acolyte. Joe, anything you want to say? Any news? Anything you want to talk about Acolyte?
I mean, I don't. I mean, I'll give uh my due diligence to it. I mean, I can't really judge it based upon the trailer. The trailers look, interesting. I mean, there's some aspects of it I kind of wonder about how it's going to be, just because of some of the prior content that we've gotten from Disney. I mean, there's just hit and misses with it, I guess you can say. And then obviously after some of this stuff comes out, like down the road, you'll hear like, oh, this is what they were going to do. Like I watched a video yesterday about some of the stuff they were going to do with Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I wish they would have done that. So I have to show you that video later, Mike. But the Acolyte, I mean, I don't know about you, but when they do the filmings now with the lightsabers, they're using real lightsabers with legitimate LEDs in them.
Yeah.
And I just don't. I To me, this doesn't look right to me. I don't know what it is. It just don't seem as bright as what you would get from like the old stuff.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
I think the older stuff looked a lot better. I mean, I know they didn't.
100%
I know
agree with that.
they had like you obviously use computers and do a lot of editing to get that. And I guess that's probably where and while they're doing that, because that way it reduces cost, which makes sense. That's one thing. A lot of people are. I heard a lot of people complaining about how the Jedi look, like in regards to the robes. Like the robes look a little weird, look a little bit different. I was like, well, it's supposed to be 100. Is it 100 years before Phantom Menace?
Yeah, it's
I think.
supposed to be.
I
I
think.
think it's 100 years before Phantom
So I was like,
Menace.
I'm not going. I said, I'm not going to have a. I said, I don't have an issue with that. I was like, it's a different time and period. I mean, clothing changed, just like what we wear now compared to like wearing stuff in the 80s or 90s. So, I mean, obviously that's not 100 years ago, but still, I was like, I can't just give quick judgment on something like that. I mean, it looks promising, obviously, with any kind of movie or show, regardless if it's Star Wars related or not. It always comes down to how the story's told.
Yep, I agree.
Really.
I agree.
I mean, if the story just isn't told properly, it's not going to make it. It's not going to be good for the watcher or the viewers watching it. So I mean, we'll have to see what it comes out. Comes out. Me, I'm almost tempted to not watch it when it first comes out, because that's probably the one thing I don't really care for with it when it comes to Disney Plus shows, is that you're having to wait, each and every week for new stuff. I might see if I can just hold out and watch it all at one time. I mean, I don't know. I might just watch it as it rolls out, and then just go back after the fact and watch it all the way through.
Yeah.
Just have to see. The only thing I hope they do, I mean, they're probably not going to, but I hope there's not too many filler episodes. That every show has had those
I
at this point.
I'm hoping not, but I did hear that the director said it was like peeling back an onion, that you get layer after layer with each episode. So I'm sure there's
Yeah,
to some degree some sort of filler, but yeah, I mean, and
yeah,
I watched the trailer overall. It seems like we've got, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy in the middle, the this is the guy that we got from Squid Games, right?
yeah. It is. Yeah,
Hmm.
it is.
So
Yeah,
he is the master. The girl in the back is the apprentice who's basically left the Jedi Order and turned, is what I've gathered. She may or may not be an assassin. She may or may not be evil. And he's like, let me bring her in. She was my apprentice. And all these other Jedi are involved. So it
yeah.
looks like she might
Precisely.
be a
Yeah.
twin. I could be wrong, but it looks like
I,
she might be a twin. And the other thing I want to mention is, if you did watch the Star Wars Eclipse trailer, Star Wars Eclipse, it kind of reminds me of this poster, and I'm kind of curious if she's two-sided. I don't know, like good and bad. Is she two people? Is she one? I don't know.
well, it's funny you say that, because I think there's twins involved in this,
Oh,
supposedly.
well, there you go.
So there's a newer trailer where the master, in the one in the middle, approaches the girl that's supposed to be like the assassin. He says, "You gotta trust me. I didn't do anything." So supposedly there might be twins, sisters. Supposedly, obviously we won't know that until we watch the show.
Yeah.
But that's supposedly what's what that might be a part of it, which would be interesting, for sure. If that's the direction they take it in. I'm just kind of curious how they do it with the dark side aspect of it, because there's a video of George talking about the Phantom Menace,
Hmm.
and he says before the Phantom Menace, he says the Sith were just sitting, waiting, taking notes, waiting for their moment to reveal themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
At last reveal
so
ourselves to the Jedi.
that
At last
that
we'll have a
technically,
revenge.
I mean, even what's his name, the Jedi Master on the Council. He says that we
Kiari
haven't seen
Mundi.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So he mentions that we haven't seen a Sith uh, for over a millennium, so over 1,000 years. So that tells me that this person cannot be a full Sith. They probably has some dark side influences, because if they are Sith or
Or they keep it hush hush because that's part of the reason that the Jedi ended up falling. It's not just the Sith were bad guys and they wanted to kill the Jedi. The Jedi were becoming a little bit corrupted and getting too involved in politics.
well, that's true too. So it makes me wonder if anyone in this show makes me wonder if anyone in this show is going to be left alive after it, because I mean, if there's people, I mean, obviously there's going to be people who can still live after the show's over with, but then the question will be, okay, so you're just going to tell me they're going to sit there and live out their days and not say a word, a peep about there potentially being uh, someone still out there, or we got to find a source where someone learned, the powers of the dark side or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Everyone's like crapping on us. Oh, I'm not going to watch it. It's going to be junk. I was like, well, I mean, trailers are one thing, watching it's another. So
Yeah.
just got to give it its due diligence. I'm going to obviously not judge anything till I watch it.
Yeah. I
Kind
mean,
of thing.
for me, like I always say, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're not going to sit here and whine. You know what I mean? If you're a real Star Wars fan, you're enjoying that they're continuing content, that you're going to get some new material. I mean, the Acolyte, it sounds interesting. I mean, hopefully nobody takes for a lack of better words, hopefully no one takes a shit on the show, but, you know,
Well, I mean, the thing they got to
um,
remember too, though, the thing they have to remember too is there's nothing to really compare this to. I mean, yeah, Yoda's going to probably be in this, I would imagine, because he would be alive at this point.
I
He'll be
understood that he
younger, obviously.
was.
He'll be younger, of course, but um, there's nothing else you can compare this to, in regards to what George pushed out, like the prequels or the originals or even the Clone War stuff. I mean, there's nothing you can really compare this to at this point. So this is all kind of be more fresh material. So I mean, no one can really say, oh, it should be like this because George said this. And the only thing that George referenced was that the Sith, that no one knew about the Sith or heard of the Sith being around for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So that's the only piece they really have to make. I mean, I don't know how they're going to work around that, or what they're going to do. But obviously, I'm excited to see what they come out with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, I mean, I have high hopes, so I guess we'll find out on June 4th and see what it's all about. Okay. All right. Well, I guess this is bringing us towards the end now. So, as we reflect on this iconic journey that began with A New Hope, I have to say it's impossible not to feel just a surge of emotion, right? A tidal wave of nostalgia just crashing over us like the waves of those tattooing desert sands. Think back to the first time that you witnessed the glow of a lightsaber igniting, or the thrill of seeing Star Wars unfold on the grand canvas of the silver screen, spaceships battling, a princess kissing a scoundrel, or the sheer joy of clutching your very own action figure, a tangible piece of that galaxy far, far away. Now, consider this. Those cherished moments aren't just fragments of our past. They're the building blocks of our very identities. They're the threads that weave together the fabric of who we are, connecting us across generations, across galaxies, and in an unbreakable bond of shared experience and wonder, just like the Force. As time marches on, we find ourselves in a new chapter of the Star Wars saga. The torchbearers of our beloved franchise, the ones who grew up with Luke, Leia, and Han, now we stand shoulder to shoulder with the next generation, passing on a legacy with a sacred torch in a relay race of hope and inspiration. Step into any corner of the galaxy, and from the bustling streets of Disney to the quiet solitude of a living room filled with toys of X-Wings, Millennium Falcons, and you'll witness the magic unfolding before your eyes. Little ones, wide-eyed and eager, brandishing lightsabers and donning their capes of their favorite heroes, their laughter echoing like a triumphant fanfare of John Williams' iconic score. Our hearts will swell with pride as we watch these young Padawans in training, their tiny hands gripping plastic sabers as they take their first steps into a larger world. For in that moment, we glimpse the eternal flame of hope flickering in their eyes, a flame that'll burn bright long after we've made the jump to light speed. Let me change the screen real quick. I've got. Here we go. Star Wars is more than the saga. To me, it's a beacon of hope in a galaxy that's often fraught with darkness. It's a reminder that no matter how small we may feel in the vast expanse of the universe, each of us has a purpose, a destiny waiting to be fulfilled. So, as we stand on the precipice of a new adventure, let's take a cue from the humble moisture farmer on Tatooine, gazing out at the twin suns with a mixture of longing and determination. For like him, we too are asked to ask ourselves, what lies beyond the horizon? What adventures await us in the great unknown? And perhaps more importantly, what role do we play in shaping the destiny of the galaxy? In the end, the Force is with us, guiding our steps, illuminating our path, and reminding us that as long as there is hope, there will always be Star Wars. And for that, we're eternally grateful. Now, let's look onto that binary sunset together as we embark onto our next great big adventure. Joe, you know what to do. Get us out of here. And remember, the Force will be with you always.